When a forensic accountant and a desperate executive are forced to share a hotel suite during the worst storm in Portland's history, they have exactly 12 hours to expose a multi-million-dollar fraud or watch her career burn to ashes. But when the power dies at dawn and the corporate wolves close in for the kill, Ethan Cross will have to choose: protect the single father's life he's carefully built, or risk everything for a woman he just met. Some numbers don't lie, some storms don't pass, and some nights change everything. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain didn't fall on Portland that Friday night. It attacked. Ethan Cross stood under the brutalist concrete overhang of the Sentinel Hotel, watching water cascade off the edges like a broken dam. His rental car's wipers had given up 3 blocks ago, and he'd abandoned it in a loading zone with the hazards blinking their futile SOS into the deluge. His laptop bag was pressed against his chest, protecting the hardware inside like it was his own child. In a way it was. The files on that drive represented 6 weeks of work, countless late nights after his daughter Mara went to sleep, and the kind of career-defining analysis that could either make his small forensic accounting firm a serious player or confirm what his ex-wife had always said, that he was wasting his talent on boutique clients who'd never appreciate what he could do. The automatic doors parted with a pneumatic sigh, releasing a wave of warmth and the low murmur of Friday night humanity seeking shelter. The lobby was chaos dressed in business casual. Stranded travelers clustered around charging stations, their phones glowing like campfires. A harried family with 3 children occupied an entire sectional, the youngest sobbing into her mother's shoulder. The storm had shut down PDX an hour ago, stranding hundreds. The highways were flooding. The city was an island, and this hotel had become an ark. Ethan's phone buzzed against his ribs. He fished it out, already knowing who it was. Mara's fine. $8 dinner, even the broccoli. Bribed her with ice cream. Hope that's okay. We're watching Encanto. Again, don't stress. Mrs. Chen. He allowed himself exactly 3 seconds of relief before typing back a thank you and pocketing the phone. Mrs. Chen was a saint. His 67-year-old neighbor had been Mara's emergency contact since the divorce, and she'd never once made him feel like the burden he knew he was. Single fathers didn't get the same grace as single mothers. Every request for help felt like an admission of failure. The front desk was a war zone. A man in a wrinkled suit was shouting about corporate rates and platinum status, his face the color of rare steak. 2 women in airline uniforms stood to the side, silent and exhausted, clearly waiting for him to burn himself out. Behind the marble counter, a young desk clerk with a name tag reading Jordan looked like he was contemplating a career change. Ethan didn't join the fray. He'd learned long ago that aggression was inefficient. Instead, he waited, watching the patterns. The angry man would tire. The airline crew would get sympathy rooms. And he would wait for the moment when Jordan's shoulders dropped and his eyes scanned the lobby for someone, anyone, who wouldn't scream at him. That moment came 90 seconds later. Ethan stepped forward, making eye contact but not crowding the desk. "Rough night," he said quietly. Jordan's laugh was sharp and broken. "You could say that." Ethan Cross. "I have a reservation, just me, 1 night, checking out tomorrow morning." Jordan's fingers flew across the keyboard, his expression shifting from exhausted to confused to something close to panic. Cross. Okay, I see you, but..." He stopped, teeth pressing into his lower lip. "Sir, there's been a system issue. We're overbooked by 14 rooms." Ethan felt the words land in his stomach like cold stones. Overbooked. The storm rerouted half the West Coast through Portland. We've been taking emergency bookings all day, and the system didn't flag. Look, I'm really sorry, but we're going to have to relocate you to a partner property. There's a shuttle that can... In this? Ethan gestured toward the windows, where the rain hit the glass like gravel from a fire hose. Jordan had no answer. "What do you have available?" Ethan asked. "Anything." More typing, a longer pause. "1 executive suite, but it's already assigned to a guest who's checking in right now." As if summoned by the words, a woman appeared at Ethan's elbow. She moved like someone who'd forgotten how to stop moving, shoulders tight, gait purposeful, eyes scanning the lobby with the hypervigilance of a person who'd been ambushed before and refused to be caught off guard again. She wore a charcoal blazer over dark jeans, Her hair pulled back in a style that was professional 3 hours ago and was now just practical. There was a smudge of something, coffee maybe, on her left cuff. Her rolling suitcase had a broken wheel that clicked against the marble with every step. She didn't look at Ethan. She looked at Jordan with the intensity of a sniper acquiring a target. "Victoria Hale," she said. Her voice was low, controlled, and edged with the kind of exhaustion that went bone deep. "Confirmation number 6629 Echo Tango." Jordan's face went pale. "Ms. Hale, yes, I have you right here, but—" "But?" The word was a scalpel. "We're overbooked. Severe weather. System error. I can offer you—" "I reserved this room 3 weeks ago," Victoria said, and now there was something underneath the control, something raw. "I confirmed it this morning. I have emails." "I understand, and I'm so sorry, but I have a presentation at 8 a.m. I have files to review. I need a workspace, a bed, and 4 hours of sleep, in that order." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. "I'm not getting on a shuttle." Jordan looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. Ethan made a decision. "What's the suite configuration?" he asked. Both Jordan and Victoria turned to stare at him. "Sir?" Jordan said. "The executive suite. What does it have?" Bedroom, separate living area with a sleeper sofa, full kitchen, 2 bathrooms, work desk." "2 bathrooms," Ethan repeated. He turned to Victoria. "I'm Ethan. I also had a reservation. Also lost it. If you're willing, we could share the space. You take the bedroom, I'll take the sofa. We both get a roof, you get your workspace, and Jordan here doesn't have to send anyone out into that." He nodded toward the storm. Victoria's eyes narrowed. She studied him with the kind of cold assessment that made Ethan feel like a balance sheet being audited. He didn't flinch. He'd been audited by worse. "You're serious," she said. "I'm practical. And I'm a single father with an 8-year-old at home. I don't have the energy for anything except work and sleep. You'll be safer with me than in a lobby full of strangers or on a highway that's half underwater." Something shifted in her expression. Not trust, not yet, but calculation. She was weighing risks, probabilities, outcomes. Ethan recognized the process. He did it 100 times a day. "What do you do?" she asked. "Forensic accountant." "For who?" "Myself, small firm. I follow money that doesn't want to be found." She almost smiled. "Almost." "And you're here because—" "Client meeting tomorrow. Was supposed to be tonight, but the storm delayed it." He paused. "You?" "Senior VP, Strategic Operations, Riverton Industries. I'm here because my company is imploding, and I have 12 hours to prove I'm not the one holding the match." Ethan blinked. That was more honesty than he'd expected. Victoria turned back to Jordan. "Can you guarantee the suite has a functioning lock on the bedroom door?" "Yes, ma'am." "And the sofa is actually a bed, not a decorative torture device?" "It's a real pull-out, Tempur-Pedic mattress." She looked at Ethan one more time. He met her gaze and didn't fill the silence with reassurances or justifications. He just waited. "If it feels wrong," she said slowly, "we adjust." "Agreed," Ethan said. Jordan looked like he'd just witnessed a miracle. His fingers blurred across the keyboard. Okay, yes, I can make this work. Suite 1407. King bed in the master, queen pull-out in the living room, 2 full baths, complimentary breakfast, late checkout available if needed. "We'll take it," Victoria said. 10 minutes later, they stood in the hallway outside 1407, keycards in hand. The carpet was thick enough to muffle the chaos below. Emergency lighting cast everything in shades of amber and shadow. Victoria swiped her card. The lock disengaged with a soft click. The suite was exactly what Jordan had promised, and more than either of them had hoped for. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the storm in all its terrible beauty, lightning fracturing the sky above the Willamette River. The living area was twice the size of Ethan's apartment, furnished in the kind of understated luxury that whispered money rather than shouting it. A kitchenette gleamed in one corner. The work desk was large enough for 2 laptops with room to spare. Victoria walked straight to the bedroom, glanced inside, then turned back to Ethan. "Lock works. Bathroom's clean. This'll do?" Ethan set his bag down on the sofa. I'll stay out of your way. I'm not worried about that. She hesitated, and for the first time he saw past the armor to the exhaustion beneath. Thank you for the offer. Most people would have fought for the room. Most people don't spend their lives looking for elegant solutions to zero-sum problems. She almost smiled again. Is that what we are? An elegant solution? We're two people who need a place to work and sleep. Everything else is noise. Victoria studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. I'm going to change and set up my files. I'll probably be working most of the night. Same, Ethan said. She disappeared into the bedroom. The door clicked shut. Not locked, he noted, but closed. A boundary, not a barricade. Ethan pulled out his laptop and phone, connecting to the hotel's Wi-Fi and pulling up his client files. His meeting tomorrow was with a mid-sized nonprofit that suspected embezzlement. Routine work, clean work. The kind of case he preferred. No ambiguity, no moral gray zones, just numbers that told the truth if you knew how to listen. He opened his messaging app and sent a quick text to Mara. Hey, Bug. Storm's bad, so I'm staying downtown tonight. Mrs. Chen's got you. Be good. Love you. Dad, 3 dots appeared immediately. Mara typed fast for an 8-year-old. I know, Dad. Mrs. Chen told me. We're having a sleepover. Can we watch Frozen 2 after Encanto? If Mrs. Chen says yes. She said yes. Then yes. But bed by 9:30. Dad! 9:45. Deal. Love you. Stay dry. He smiled, pocketing the phone. Mara was resilient. She'd had to be. The divorce had been brutal. Not because of screaming matches or infidelity, but because of something quieter and more corrosive. His ex-wife, Simone, had wanted a partner who could dream big, take risks, build empires. Ethan had wanted stability, structure, predictability. He'd wanted to be there when Mara woke up from nightmares, and when she lost her first tooth, and when she needed help with homework. Simone had called it small thinking. He'd called it being present. In the end, they'd both been right and both been wrong, and Mara had paid the price. Now she split her time between 2 homes, 2 lives, 2 versions of normal. Ethan's job was to make his version as stable as physics would allow. A sound from the bedroom pulled him from his thoughts, a sharp intake of breath followed by silence. He waited. No follow-up. He returned to his work. 20 minutes passed. Then the bedroom door opened. Victoria emerged barefoot, wearing joggers and an oversized Stanford sweatshirt that had seen better years. Her hair was down now, falling just past her shoulders. She looked younger without the armor of professional dress, and more exhausted. She carried a laptop and a leather portfolio bulging with papers. She didn't ask permission. She just walked to the desk, set down her materials, and looked at Ethan. I need to talk through something, she said. And I need someone who isn't going to panic, lie to me, or try to fix it with motivational bullshit. Ethan closed his own laptop. I can do that. Victoria pulled out the desk chair and sat, her movements precise despite the exhaustion. She opened the portfolio and extracted a sheaf of documents, spreading them across the desk like a crime scene. Riverton Industries, she began, her voice steady but strained. $57 million in annual revenue, 340 employees. We manufacture industrial filtration systems, water treatment, air quality, that kind of thing. Boring, profitable, clean. Until, Ethan prompted, until 6 weeks ago, when our auditor flagged irregularities in vendor payments. She tapped one of the documents. My division, my budget, my signature authority. Ethan leaned forward. Your predecessor's work or yours? I've been in this role for 8 months. My predecessor, David Lowell, ran the division for 6 years before taking early retirement. Very sudden, very generous severance package. Her jaw tightened. Now we know why. He was skimming. Worse, he was running an entire phantom vendor network. Fake invoices, shell companies, payments routed through 3 layers of corporate entities before disappearing into accounts we can't trace. She pulled out another document, a spreadsheet dense with numbers. The auditor found 2 million in questionable transactions, but I think it's more. I think it's a lot more. Ethan's pulse quickened despite himself. This was the kind of case that forensic accountants dreamed about. Complex, high stakes, with layers to peel back and patterns to decode. What does your board know? Everything and nothing. They know there's fraud. They know it happened on Lowell's watch, But they also know I signed off on dozens of those payments in my first 6 months because I trusted the systems he'd built. She met his eyes. I walked into a room he'd already rigged, but to them, I look complicit. When's the audit presentation? Tomorrow, 8 a.m., emergency session. The board wants answers, and the audit committee is looking for someone to blame. Her voice didn't waver, but her hands gripped the edge of the desk. If I can't prove the fraud started before I arrived, and that I had no knowledge of it, they'll terminate me. And my career in this industry will be over. Ethan was quiet for a moment, processing. What do you have for evidence? Emails, payment records, vendor contracts. But it's a mess. Lowell was careful. Everything looks legitimate on the surface. I'd need to cross-reference every invoice against delivery records, verify vendor registrations, trace payment chains, and I'd need to do it in... She glanced at her watch. 11 hours. You can't do that alone. I know. She looked at him fully now, and he saw it. The thing she'd been holding back. Not fear, desperation. I know you don't know me. I know you have your own work, but you said you follow money that doesn't want to be found. I did. I'm not asking for charity. I'll pay you. Whatever your rate is, double it. I just need someone who can look at these numbers and tell me if I'm crazy or if there's really a pattern buried in here. Ethan should have said no. He had his own client meeting in the morning. He had Mara waiting at home. He had a carefully balanced life that didn't have room for spontaneous pro bono work for strangers in hotel suites. But he looked at the spreadsheet on her desk and he saw what she saw. The slight irregularities in payment amounts, the suspicious clustering of dates, the vendors with names just generic enough to be forgettable. He saw the trap. And he saw a woman who'd walked into that trap through no fault of her own, who was now fighting not for wealth or status, but for something simpler, the truth. Show me everything, he said. Victoria's shoulders dropped half an inch, relief she couldn't quite hide. She stood gathering the documents. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If the fraud's as deep as you think, 11 hours might not be enough. Then we'd better not waste any. They worked in silence at first, Ethan absorbing the landscape of the data while Victoria organized files on her laptop. Outside, the storm intensified, rain hammering the windows in rhythmic waves. The suite's lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. Ethan opened the first invoice file and felt the familiar calm settle over him, the hunter's focus. Numbers didn't lie, but they could be made to whisper. His job was to listen. Within 15 minutes, he found the first anomaly. Here, he said, turning his laptop toward Victoria. Vendor invoice from March 15th. Payment to Summit Valley Supply for filtration membranes. $11,400. Victoria leaned in, scanning the screen. Okay, what's wrong with it? Nothing, if it's real. But look at the amount. Just under the $12,000 threshold that would require secondary approval from the CFO. Lowell stayed under the limit. Exactly. Now look at this. Ethan opened another file. April 3rd, different vendor, Cascade Technical Solutions. Filtration housing units, 11,800. Still under 12,000. And here, April 22nd, Riverbend Manufacturing, 11,600. He opened 3 more files in rapid succession, each showing payments between $10,000 and $12,000. He's structuring, breaking large payments into smaller chunks to avoid oversight. Victoria's eyes widened. That's... How many of these are there? Ethan ran a quick filter on the spreadsheet, isolating payments in the 10 to 12,000 range. The results populated slowly, line after line after line. 63 payments, $712,000. That's just one pattern, Ethan said quietly. There'll be others. Victoria sat down slowly, staring at the screen. I approved half of these. I signed the authorizations. You approved what looked like legitimate operational expenses, properly documented and under the authority threshold. That's not complicity. That's being set up. The board won't see it that way. Then we make them see it. Ethan pulled the laptop back and opened a new document. We build a forensic narrative. We show the pattern existed before you arrived. We show Lowell's signature on the early invoices and the vendor setup approvals. We prove you inherited a machine that was already running. Can we do that in 11 hours? Ethan looked at the clock on his laptop. 9:47 p.m. Let's find out. They fell into a rhythm. Victoria pulled records from her company's cloud archive, vendor contracts, email chains, payment authorizations. Ethan dissected them, building a timeline, mapping relationships, following the money through its carefully constructed maze. At midnight, they found the shell companies. Summit Valley Supply, Ethan said, pulling up the business registration. Incorporated in Delaware, April 2022. Registered agent is a corporate services firm that specializes in anonymous LLCs. No public website. No phone number. No physical address except a mail drop. Victoria's face was pale in the laptop glow. Cascade Technical? Same registration firm, same month, same setup. Riverbend? Bingo. She pushed back from the desk, hands shaking. He created an entire fake supply chain. And he was careful. Real vendors mixed with fake ones. Legitimate purchases alongside phantom invoices. Enough real business to make the pattern invisible unless you knew what to look for. How much? Her voice was barely a whisper. Total. How much did he take? Ethan ran the numbers, cross-referencing vendor registrations against payment records, filtering for shell companies and suspicious patterns. The total climbed slowly, then faster. 2 million. 3. 4. When it stopped, he stared at the screen for 10 full seconds before speaking. $7.4 million, he said. Conservative estimate. Could be more if he has other schemes we haven't found yet. Victoria made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. 7 million. From a $57 million company. Over 6 years, that's 1.2 million annually, roughly 2% of revenue, small enough to hide an operational variance, large enough to fund a very comfortable retirement. And I'm the one who has to explain it to the board in, she checked her watch, 8 hours. You're the one who gets to expose it, Ethan corrected. There's a difference. She looked at him, and for the first time he saw something other than exhaustion or desperation in her eyes. He saw anger. You're right, she said quietly. Lowell walked away clean. Golden parachute, severance, probably a reference letter praising his leadership. And I get to stand in front of a board and defend myself for crimes I didn't commit. Then don't defend, Ethan said. Attack. Show them what really happened. Show them you're the one who found it. With your help. I'm a consultant. You hired me. That's good business, not weakness. Victoria managed a real smile this time, sharp and fierce. Okay, what's next? Next, we build the presentation, but first, Ethan stood, stretching muscles that had gone stiff. We eat. When's the last time you had food? She blinked. I don't remember. Lunch, maybe? Not acceptable. You can't think on an empty tank. He walked to the kitchenette and opened the mini fridge. We've got overpriced peanuts, chocolate bars, and something that might have been a sandwich in a previous life. Glamorous. I have an 8-year-old. My standards for cuisine are pretty low. He grabbed the peanuts and chocolate, tossing them onto the coffee table. This'll keep us functional until breakfast. They ate standing up, too wired to sit, too focused to relax. The storm outside had settled into a steady assault, no longer spectacular but relentless. Lightning flickered at intervals, casting the city in brief, stark relief. Can I ask you something? Victoria said, breaking a piece of chocolate in half. Sure. Why are you helping me, really? It's not the money. You haven't even quoted a rate. And you don't know me. Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering. I spent 3 years working for a Big Four accounting firm. High-stakes audits, corporate due diligence, merger analysis. I was good at it, but I was also miserable. 80-hour weeks, constant travel, partners who cared more about billable hours than actual truth. He paused. When my daughter was born, I made a choice. I left, started my own practice. Small clients, local work, cases I believed in. And this is a case you believe in? I believe in people who get blamed for things they didn't do. I believe in finding the truth, even when it's buried deep. And I believe, he met her eyes, that you walked into that room like you said. You didn't build the trap. Victoria held his gaze and something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. Your daughter, she said. What's her name? Mara. Is she the reason you didn't fight me for the room? Ethan smiled. She's the reason for most of my decisions. good ones and bad. Sounds like a good one to me. They returned to work. By 3 a.m., they had a complete forensic timeline. By 4, they drafted the presentation outline. By 5, Victoria's eyes were glazing over, her sentences fragmenting into half-thoughts. "You need to sleep," Ethan said. "Can't. Too much to do. You're going to stand in front of a board in 3 hours and defend your career. You need to be sharp. Sleep." "What about you?" "I'll keep working. I'm used to late nights." She wanted to argue. He could see it in the way her jaw set, but exhaustion won. She gathered her laptop and papers, moving toward the bedroom with the careful steps of someone navigating on muscle memory alone. At the door, she paused. "Ethan?" "Yeah?" "If this goes badly tomorrow, thank you for trying. It won't go badly. We have the evidence. We have the truth. Evidence isn't always enough." "No," he agreed, "but it's a start." She disappeared into the bedroom. This time, the door clicked locked. Ethan returned to his laptop, fine-tuning the presentation, double-checking calculations, building redundancies into every argument. Outside, the storm began to shift, the rain easing from torrential to merely heavy, the wind dropping from howl to moan. At 6 a.m., his phone buzzed. "Morning, Dad. Mrs. Chen is making pancakes. Are you coming home today?" He smiled despite the exhaustion. "Yes, Bug. This afternoon. Save me a pancake. No promises. They're really good." "Fair enough. Love you." "Love you too, Dad. Mrs. Chen says be safe. Always." He set the phone down and looked at the presentation one final time. It was solid, meticulous, damning. If the board had any integrity at all, Victoria would walk out of that room cleared. But Ethan had been in enough boardrooms to know that integrity was often negotiable. At 7:15, Victoria emerged from the bedroom. She'd showered, dressed in fresh clothes from her suitcase, charcoal slacks, cream blouse, navy blazer. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She looked professional, composed, ready. Only her eyes gave her away. The exhaustion still there, but something else now too. Determination. "How do I look?" she asked. "Like someone who's about to ruin David Lowell's retirement." She laughed. A real laugh this time, not bitter or broken. "Good. That's the plan." Ethan handed her a thumb drive. "Everything's on here. Timeline and invoices, vendor registrations, payment patterns, email evidence. I've organized it by theme and chronology. Start with the pattern recognition, move to the shell companies, finish with the total fraud estimate." Victoria took the drive like it was a weapon. "You're not coming? This is your fight. You need to own it. I couldn't have done this without you. You hired a consultant. Smart executives delegate. Own that too." She nodded slowly, pocketing the drive. "If this works, when this works, I owe you dinner. A real one. Not hotel peanuts. I'll hold you to that." They stood in the center of the suite, the morning light just beginning to break through the storm clouds, casting long shadows across the floor. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Victoria stepped forward and shook his hand, firm, professional, final. "Thank you, Ethan Cross." "Good luck, Victoria Hale." She left at 7:30, wheeling her broken suitcase behind her, the click-click-click fading down the hallway. Ethan stood at the window, watching the storm's last gasps, and allowed himself one moment of doubt. What if the board didn't care about evidence? What if Lowell had allies? What if Victoria walked into that room and they destroyed her anyway? He pushed the thoughts away. He'd done his job. The rest was out of his hands. His phone buzzed again. A reminder for his own client meeting at 10 a.m. He had 2.5 hours to shower, prep, and get across town to a nonprofit office in Northeast Portland. But first, he pulled out his laptop one final time and sent a single email to his own encrypted archive, attaching every file from Victoria's case, just in case. Then he pulled out the sleeper sofa, finally, and let himself collapse into unconsciousness. He dreamed of numbers that wouldn't balance, doors that wouldn't lock, and a little girl asking him if he was coming home. He woke to his alarm at 9 a.m., disoriented and stiff. The suite was silent except for the diminishing rain. He showered, changed, checked his messages. Nothing from Victoria. He told himself that was normal. She was in the meeting. She was fighting. He packed his bag, checked out, and stepped into a Portland morning that was washed clean and quietly recovering. The streets were slick but passable. His rental car was still in the loading zone, miraculously unticketed. He drove to his meeting on autopilot, his mind still in that hotel suite, still tracking patterns in the numbers, still wondering if he'd done enough. The nonprofit meeting was routine, easy. A bookkeeper had been embezzling modest amounts over 2 years, clumsy, traceable, already half caught by their own internal review. Ethan confirmed the details, provided documentation, and was out by 11:30. He drove home in sunlight that felt surreal after the night's violence. Mrs. Chen met him at the door of his apartment building, Mara bouncing beside her like a rubber ball. "Dad!" Mara launched herself into his arms, and he caught her, breathing in the scent of syrup and strawberry shampoo. "Hey, bug!" Mrs. Chen made the best pancakes, and we watched 3 movies, and she taught me how to play mahjong, and I won twice. "She let you win," Ethan said, grinning at Mrs. Chen. "I let her win once," Mrs. Chen said primly. "The second time she earned it." They said their goodbyes and thank yous, and Ethan carried Mara upstairs, listening to her chatter about the storm, the movies, the pancakes. Safe, home, normal. He set her down in the living room and checked his phone. One new message, from an unknown number. It worked, they saw it. "Lowell's being investigated. I'm clear. I don't know how to thank you." Victoria Ethan stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. "Glad to hear it. You did the hard part." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Dinner, tomorrow night. My treat. I owe you more than peanuts." He hesitated. Mara was already pulling out her coloring books, settling into the afternoon routine. Tomorrow was Saturday, his day with her. No work, no distractions. But something in him, the part that had stayed up all night chasing numbers through the dark, the part that had watched Victoria walk into battle with his evidence in her hand, wanted to say yes. "I have my daughter tomorrow. Rain check?" The reply came immediately. "Of course. Whenever works. I'm not going anywhere." He smiled and pocketed the phone. "Dad?" Mara looked up from her coloring book. "You're smiley. Did something good happen?" "Yeah, bug. Something good happened." "What?" "I helped someone find the truth." Mara considered this with the seriousness only an 8-year-old could muster. "Was it hard?" "Very." "But you did it anyway." "I did." She nodded sagely and returned to her coloring. "That's good. That's what heroes do." Ethan sat down beside her, picking up a green crayon, and thought about Victoria standing in that boardroom, alone, armed with nothing but numbers and the truth. Maybe Mara was right. Maybe that was what heroes did. Outside, the last of the storm clouds broke apart, and the sun finally won. The rain check lasted 3 days. Ethan spent Saturday building a blanket fort with Mara in the living room, constructing an architectural marvel of couch cushions and bed sheets that she declared the best castle ever. They ate pizza inside it for dinner, watched Moana for what had to be the 40th time, and fell asleep side by side while the credits rolled. Sunday was grocery shopping, laundry, and helping Mara practice her multiplication tables with flashcards that she attacked like a competitive sport. By Monday morning, when he dropped her off at school, his life had settled back into its familiar rhythm, predictable, structured, safe. Victoria's message came that afternoon while he was reviewing bank statements for a small restaurant owner who suspected his manager of skimming. "Wednesday night, 7 p.m., there's a place in the Pearl District that does incredible Italian." My way of saying thank you properly. He stared at the message longer than necessary, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. Wednesday was usually his night to prep for the week ahead, review case files, return client calls. Mara would be with Simone. He'd have the evening free. "Wednesday works. Send me the address." The reply was almost instant. "Perfect." "And Ethan? Wear something nice. You've earned a night that doesn't involve hotel peanuts." He smiled despite himself and returned to the bank statements, but his focus had fractured. His mind kept circling back to that Friday night, the storm, the suite, the quiet intensity of hunting fraud through spreadsheets while the city drowned outside. He told himself it was just another case, just another client who needed help. But he knew better. Something about Victoria's controlled desperation, her refusal to crumble under pressure, had gotten under his skin in a way that numbers usually didn't. Wednesday arrived faster than expected. Ethan stood in front of his closet at 6:15, staring at a row of clothes that hadn't seen action in months. The divorce had stripped his wardrobe down to essentials: work casual for client meetings, jeans and t-shirts for weekends with Mara. The dark gray suit he finally pulled out still had the dry cleaning tag attached. He'd bought it for a wedding 2 years ago and hadn't worn it since. The restaurant Victoria had chosen, Sorella, occupied a converted warehouse in the Pearl District, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs, and the kind of understated elegance that didn't need to announce itself. Ethan arrived exactly on time, a habit he couldn't break even when he tried, and found Victoria already waiting at a corner table near the windows. She'd traded her corporate armor for something softer, a deep burgundy dress that caught the candlelight, her hair loose around her shoulders. She stood when she saw him, and her smile was genuine, unguarded in a way he hadn't seen before. "You clean up well," she said. "So do you." They sat, and for a moment the silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with everything unsaid. A server appeared with menus and water, reciting specials in a practiced cadence before disappearing. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Victoria said finally. "Why wouldn't I?" "Because Friday night was intense and weird, and I basically hijacked your evening and made you work through the night for a stranger." "You paid me," Ethan said mildly. "Well, you offered to. We never actually discussed the rate." Victoria's smile turned sharp. "We're discussing it now. What do I owe you?" "Dinner was the agreement. That's not a rate. That's an insult to your work." Ethan set down his menu and met her eyes. "You needed help. I had the skills. The rest is just accounting. The rest is the difference between me having a career and being blacklisted from every boardroom in the Pacific Northwest." Her voice was steady, but her hands gripped the edge of the table. The board meeting lasted 4 hours. They went through every file, every invoice, every email. The audit committee wanted blood, but the evidence was airtight. They couldn't ignore it. What happened to Lowell? Criminal investigation launched Monday morning. FBI's involved now. Financial Crimes Unit. They think he had help, someone inside the company who's still there. She paused, her jaw tightening. They've frozen his accounts, seized his assets. The golden parachute evaporated, and he's hired a very expensive lawyer. "Good," Ethan said quietly. "The board cleared me, publicly, sent a company-wide memo confirming that I'd uncovered the fraud and cooperated fully with the investigation. My division's budget is under enhanced scrutiny for the next quarter, but I'm still standing." "That's more than standing. That's winning." Victoria's expression softened. "I couldn't have done it without you." "You could have. It would have taken longer and been messier, but you would have gotten there." "Maybe. But I didn't have time for longer or messier." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you, Ethan. Really." Her touch was brief, professional, but it carried weight. He felt it settle somewhere behind his ribs. The server returned and they ordered wild mushroom risotto for her, braised short ribs for him, a bottle of wine that Victoria insisted on despite his protests. The conversation shifted to safer territory, her years climbing corporate ladders, his transition from Big Four to boutique practice, the shared understanding that came from living in the spaces between ambition and survival. "How long were you married?" Victoria asked during the second glass of wine. Ethan didn't flinch. He'd learned to talk about the divorce the way he talked about closed cases, factually, without emotion. 5 years. Together for 7. "What happened?" "We wanted different things. She wanted big risks and bigger rewards. I wanted to be home for bedtime stories." "And Mara?" "Chose bedtime stories." He smiled. "She's with her mom Wednesday through Friday, with me the rest of the week. It works. Mostly." "Do you regret it, the divorce?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "I regret that Mara has to split her life between 2 homes. I regret that Simone and I couldn't find a middle ground. But I don't regret choosing stability over chaos." Victoria nodded slowly. "I've never been married, came close once in my 20s. He was a consultant, traveled constantly. I was building my career, working 80-hour weeks. We barely saw each other, but we convinced ourselves it was sustainable." She paused. "It wasn't. He wanted someone who'd be there when he got home from trips. I wanted someone who understood why I couldn't be." What happened? He married someone else 6 months after we broke up. They have 3 kids now. He quit consulting and teaches high school economics in Eugene. Do you regret it? I regret the timing. If we'd met 5 years later, maybe we both would have been different people. She swirled her wine, watching the light refract through the glass. But I don't regret choosing my career. I worked too hard to build it to watch it collapse because I was supposed to be someone's waiting wife. Ethan raised his glass. To people who make hard choices. Victoria clinked hers against his. And to people who help them survive the consequences. They finished dinner over stories that grew looser with the wine. His accounting professor who'd failed him twice before becoming his mentor, her first board presentation that had gone so badly she'd locked herself in a bathroom stall for 20 minutes afterward. The restaurant emptied around them, other diners filtering out into the cool Portland night, but neither of them moved to leave. It was Victoria who finally broke the spell. I need to tell you something, she said, and the tone shift was immediate, the warmth draining from her voice, replaced by something harder. The investigation into Lowell. It's bigger than I thought. Ethan set down his glass. How much bigger? The FBI agent handling the case called me yesterday. They've been tracking Lowell for 18 months. He wasn't just running fraud at Riverton. He had 3 other schemes at previous companies. Different methods, same pattern, embed himself, build trust, create phantom systems, drain the accounts, retire early. How much total? North of 20 million, maybe more. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. But here's the part that keeps me up at night. They think someone at Riverton helped him, someone still there, someone who knew the systems well enough to cover his tracks even after he left. Ethan's mind shifted into analysis mode. Who had access to the same authorization levels? 4 people. Me, obviously. The CFO, Marcus Tennant, been with the company 12 years. The COO, Sharon Wu, 8 years. And the head of procurement, Brian Casper, 10 years. Have they been questioned? All of us. Separately. They're treating everyone as a potential suspect until they can prove otherwise. Her hands tightened around her glass. Which means I'm still not clear. Not really. I'm just the person who happened to find the evidence first. Evidence you found with forensic analysis that clearly showed you weren't involved. Evidence I found with help from an outside consultant they can't verify because you're not under their jurisdiction. She met his eyes. Ethan, they asked me about you. Who you were, how I knew you, why I hired you on a Friday night during a storm. Something cold settled in Ethan's chest. What did you tell them? The truth. That we met in a hotel lobby during an emergency booking situation. That I hired you because you're a forensic accountant and I needed one. That you worked through the night pro bono because I couldn't afford to wait. And they believed you? They didn't not believe me, but they flagged it as irregular. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to an email, then turned the screen toward him. This came this morning. The email was from FBI Special Agent Melissa Garrett, CC'd to Victoria's corporate counsel. The language was bureaucratic but clear. All external consultants who had accessed Riverton financial data during the investigation window needed to be vetted and potentially interviewed. Ethan's name was listed specifically. They want to talk to you, Victoria said quietly. Ethan read the email twice, his mind already running scenarios. When? Soon, maybe this week. They're building a case against Lowell, but they're also looking for his accomplice. If they can't find one, they'll assume the simplest answer, that I was involved and I'm covering my tracks. That's not what the evidence shows. Evidence can be interpreted, especially by people who want a specific outcome. She took her phone back, her jaw tight. If they decide I'm the accomplice, everything I built is gone. Not just my job, my reputation, my entire career. Ethan leaned back, processing. This wasn't just about fraud anymore. This was about survival in a system that ate people who looked guilty, whether they were or not. What do you need from me? He asked. I need you to tell them the truth, that I hired you legitimately, that the analysis was clean, that you saw no evidence of my involvement. I can do that. And I need you to understand that talking to them puts you at risk too. They'll dig into your background, your firm, your client list. They'll want to know if you have any connection to Lowell, to Riverton, to anyone involved. I don't. I believe you, but belief isn't proof. She paused. If this gets messy, I don't want you caught in the blast radius. Ethan thought about Mara, about the careful life he'd built, about the risks that came with getting involved in other people's disasters. He should walk away. He should tell Victoria to find another consultant, another expert, someone without a daughter depending on them. But he looked at her across the table, exhausted, defiant, refusing to break even as the walls closed in, and he knew he wouldn't. I'm already involved, he said, and I don't leave cases half-finished. Victoria's expression cracked, just slightly, relief bleeding through the armor. You're either very brave or very stupid. I'm a single father with an 8-year-old. I stopped being brave years ago. This is just stubbornness. She laughed, a real laugh, sharp and surprised. I'll take it. The server appeared with the check, and Victoria grabbed it before Ethan could move. I said my treat. You're paying me to potentially get interrogated by the FBI. The least I can do is split the bill. Not a chance. She handed over her card without looking at the total. Besides, if this goes badly, it might be the last decent meal I can afford for a while. It won't go badly. You don't know that. No, Ethan admitted. But I know the numbers don't lie. And I know you didn't build that trap. They left the restaurant into a Portland night that had turned crisp and clear. The earlier rain washed away, stars visible between the gaps in the city's light pollution. Victoria's car was parked 2 blocks away. Ethan had taken the MAX train, a decision he was now reconsidering. I can give you a ride, Victoria offered. You've done enough. It's midnight and you helped save my career. Let me drive you home. He relented and they walked in comfortable silence, their footsteps echoing off the wet pavement. Her car was a practical sedan, a few years old, the back seat scattered with file folders and a reusable coffee cup that had clearly been there for weeks. Sorry about the mess, she said, unlocking the doors. I spend more time in this car than in my apartment some weeks. I have goldfish crackers ground into my floor mats and a car seat that smells like old apple juice. You're doing fine. The drive across the river toward Ethan's neighborhood in Southeast was quiet at first, the radio playing something jazzy and instrumental. Victoria drove with the same controlled precision she brought to everything else. Hands at 10 and 2, eyes on the road, no unnecessary risks. Can I ask you something? She said after a few minutes. Sure. Why accounting? Of all the things you could have done, why follow money through spreadsheets? Ethan smiled. You sound like my ex-wife. Is that a compliment or an insult? Neither, just an observation. He watched the city lights blur past. I like problems with clear answers. Fraud is binary. It happened or it didn't. The money went somewhere or it didn't. There's no ambiguity, no moral gray zones, just numbers that tell the truth if you know how to listen. But you left the big firm. You could have made partner, built a legacy. I could have, but legacy doesn't tuck my daughter into bed. It doesn't help her with homework or make pancakes on Saturday morning. He paused. Simone used to say I was wasting my potential, that I was choosing small over significant. What do you think? I think significance is subjective. To Mara, I'm the most significant person in her world. That's enough for me. Victoria was quiet for a moment. You're a good father. I'm a present father. That's different. No, she said firmly. It's not. They pulled up outside Ethan's apartment building, a modest 3-story structure with tired siding and a shared garden that someone had optimistically planted with tomatoes. Light glowed in Mrs. Chen's window on the first floor. Ethan's own apartment was dark. This is me, he said. Victoria put the car in park but didn't unlock the doors. The FBI agent, Garrett, she's thorough. She's going to ask hard questions. I've been audited before. I'll survive. I'm serious, Ethan. If they push you, if they try to make you say I was involved, I'll tell them the truth. That's all I can do. She turned to face him fully, and in the dim glow of the streetlight, he saw the fear she'd been holding back. What if the truth isn't enough? Then we find more truth. We dig deeper. We don't stop until we hit bedrock. You really believe that, don't you? That the truth always wins. I believe it wins more often than it loses. And I believe people like Lowell count on everyone else being too tired or too scared to keep digging. He reached for the door handle. I'm not tired. and I'm definitely not scared of spreadsheets. Victoria smiled despite herself. You're either a terrible liar or the most genuine person I've met in years. Can it be both? She laughed, and the sound filled the car like light breaking through clouds. Get some sleep, Ethan Cross. Something tells me we're going to need it. He climbed out, then paused with the door half open. Victoria? Yeah? Whatever happens with the FBI, with the investigation, you didn't do this. Don't let them make you doubt that. She held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Same to you. He closed the door and watched her drive away, taillights disappearing around the corner. Then he climbed the stairs to his apartment, unlocked the door, and stepped into the familiar silence. His laptop sat on the kitchen table where he'd left it that morning. He should sleep. It was late, and he had an early client call tomorrow. But his mind was already spinning, already circling back to those invoices, those phantom vendors, that too-perfect pattern of fraud. He opened the laptop and pulled up the files he'd archived from Victoria's case. The numbers stared back at him, clean and damning. But something nagged at him, a detail he'd noticed Friday night and hadn't had time to chase. The payment dates. Lowell had been careful to space them irregularly, no obvious pattern, no monthly rhythm. But Ethan ran a frequency analysis anyway, plotting the dates on a calendar, looking for clusters. And there it was. Every phantom payment landed within 3 days of Riverton's quarterly board meetings, like clockwork, for 6 years. Ethan's pulse quickened. That wasn't random. That was strategic. Board meetings meant increased scrutiny on big-picture finances, which meant less attention on operational details. Lowell had timed his theft to exploit the blind spots. But more than that, it meant someone had given him the board meeting schedule, someone inside the company who knew when those blind spots would open. Ethan grabbed his phone and pulled up Victoria's contact. His thumb hovered over the call button. It was nearly 1 a.m. She'd be asleep. Or trying to be. He texted instead. Found something. Payment dates align with board meetings. All of them. Need to cross-reference who had access to the board calendar. 3 dots appeared immediately. She wasn't sleeping either. How is that possible? Board dates are confidential until 30 days out. Exactly. Whoever helped Lowell had advance access, executive level or higher. The dots appeared and disappeared 3 times before her response came through. That's 4 people. Me, Tennant, Wu, Casper. You've been in the role 8 months. Pattern goes back 6 years. You're out. Which leaves 3. One of whom is Lowell's accomplice. There was a longer pause this time. When her message came, it was a single word. Fuck. Ethan almost smiled. The profanity felt earned. We need to narrow it down. Who had the most consistent access to vendor systems? Casper. Head of procurement. He literally built the vendor management platform. And who signs off on executive calendar changes? Wu. She's COO. Board scheduling goes through her office. What about Tennant, CFO? He reviews all vendor payments over $15,000. But Lowell stayed under that threshold. Ethan pulled up his analysis again, filtering for payments between $12,000 and $15,000. There were 11 of them, all signed off by someone with higher authority, who approved the payments between $12,000 to $15,000. Would have been Tennant. Those needed CFO secondary approval even under threshold because of dollar amount. So Tennant saw them. All of them. The dots appeared, stopped, appeared again. He could have flagged them, if he'd wanted to, but he didn't. No, he didn't. Ethan stared at the screen, pieces clicking into place. 3 suspects, 3 different access points, but only one person who'd seen the payments and let them pass. I think we know who it is, Tennant. He's been CFO for 12 years. He built relationships with the board. He would have known Lowell, trusted him, maybe even helped set up the initial systems. Or he was in on it from the start. The weight of that settled between them, even through text messages. What do we do? Victoria asked. We prove it, before the FBI does. How? Ethan thought about his daughter asleep in the next room, about the careful life he'd built, about all the reasons he should say no. We dig deeper, we find the connection, and we hand the FBI a case they can't ignore. Ethan, if we're wrong, we're not. The numbers don't lie. The numbers didn't save me from suspicion, because the FBI doesn't trust numbers. They trust connections. People. We give them a person. We give them something they can arrest. Another long pause. When do we start? Tomorrow. I'll need access to tenants' email records, vendor contracts from his tenure, anything showing direct communication with Lowell. That's internal company data. I can't just hand it over without cause. You're cooperating with a federal investigation. That's cause. They'll want to know why I'm targeting tenants specifically. Tell them you hired a forensic consultant who identified a pattern in payment approvals. Tell them the truth. The truth gets me deeper into the investigation. The truth also gets you out of it. Eventually. He could almost hear her thinking through the phone, weighing risks against rewards, survival against surrender. Okay, she finally sent. I'll request the files tomorrow morning, under the guise of comprehensive cooperation. But Ethan? Yeah? If this blows back on you on your daughter, I'll never forgive myself. Then we make sure it doesn't blow back. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's necessary. The conversation ended there, both of them out of words, out of reassurances that weren't built on hope. Ethan closed his laptop and sat in the dark kitchen, listening to the building settle around him. Down the hall, Mara's bedroom door was slightly ajar, the way she liked it. Not closed enough to feel trapped, not open enough to let the monsters in. He walked quietly to her doorway and looked in. She was sprawled across her bed in the chaotic way only children managed. Blankets kicked off, one arm flung over her stuffed rabbit. Her nightlight cast cartoon stars across the ceiling. She looked peaceful. Safe. Ethan had built his entire life around keeping her that way. And now he was walking into a federal investigation, chasing fraud through corporate systems, putting himself in the crosshairs of people who'd already stolen $20 million and wouldn't hesitate to destroy anyone who got in their way. He should stop. He should tell Victoria to find someone else. He should protect what mattered most. But he thought about Victoria standing in that boardroom, alone, armed with nothing but the evidence he'd helped her find. He thought about Lowell walking away clean while she burned. He thought about Tennant sitting in his CFO office, probably sleeping just fine, while the FBI hunted for an accomplice they'd already paid and protected. Some things were worth the risk. He closed Mara's door softly and returned to the kitchen. His laptop opened again, files spreading across the screen like a map of a war he'd just enlisted in. Outside, Portland slept under clearing skies. The storm long past, the damage done and waiting to be counted. Ethan Cross didn't sleep at all. The files arrived in Victoria's inbox at 6:47 Thursday morning, 3 hours before Ethan had expected them, and half an hour before he'd managed to drag himself out of bed. His phone buzzed against the nightstand, pulling him from a dreamless sleep that felt more like unconsciousness than rest. Got them. Tenant's email archive, vendor contracts, board calendar access logs. Sending encrypted link now. He sat up, reaching for his laptop before his eyes had fully adjusted to the morning light filtering through his bedroom blinds. The encrypted link loaded slowly, revealing a directory structure that made his forensic accountant heart skip a beat. Victoria had gone beyond what he'd asked for. She'd pulled everything. 12 years of Marcus Tennant's digital footprint at Riverton Industries, organized by year, cross-referenced by subject, tagged with metadata that would make the analysis almost surgical. How did you get all this? He texted back. Told corporate counsel I was providing comprehensive cooperation to the FBI. They gave me blanket access to executive records under investigation protocol. Tennant doesn't know yet. When he finds out, he'll lawyer up, which is why we need to move fast. Ethan glanced at the clock. Mara would be up in 20 minutes, hungry for breakfast and full of questions about her school project on ocean ecosystems. He had exactly 0 time for a deep forensic dive into a CFO's email history. He did it anyway. The first pattern emerged within 15 minutes. Tennant and Lowell had exchanged emails weekly, sometimes daily, throughout Lowell's entire tenure. Most were innocuous operational discussions about budget allocations, departmental spending, vendor negotiations. But scattered among the mundane were messages that made Ethan's skin prickle. March 2019, Lowell to Tennant. Need to discuss the new vendor approval threshold. Coffee? This week? March 2019, Tennant to Lowell. Wednesday works. Let's keep it off campus. Off campus. Ethan flagged the exchange and kept reading. June 2020, Lowell to Tennant. The board's getting twitchy about operational spending. Might need to adjust our approach. June 2020, tenant to Lowell. I'll handle the board. You focus on execution. We've come too far to get sloppy now. Execution. We. Too far. Ethan's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up the vendor payment records from June 2020. 3 phantom invoices totaling $38,000, all approved by tenant within a week of that email exchange. Dad! He looked up to find Mara standing in his doorway, hair wild from sleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit by one ear. Hey, Bug, you're up early. I heard typing. You always type loud when you're doing important stuff. She padded into the room, climbing onto the bed beside him. What's important? Ethan closed the laptop halfway, enough to shield the screen, but not enough to look like he was hiding something. Just work. Helping someone solve a puzzle. What kind of puzzle? The kind where someone hid things they weren't supposed to hide, and now we're finding them. Mara considered this with the gravity only an 8-year-old could muster. Like when Tommy Chen hid my favorite eraser and said he didn't know where it was, but I found it in his desk anyway? Exactly like that. Did you tell them they're in big trouble? Working on it. She nodded, satisfied, then wriggled under his arm to look at the laptop screen. There's a lot of words. There are. Do they all matter? Ethan thought about tenants' carefully worded emails, about Lowell's phantom vendors, about Victoria standing in a boardroom with her career on the line. Every single one. Then you better keep reading. She kissed his cheek with the unself-conscious affection that he knew wouldn't last forever and slid off the bed. I'm making cereal. Want some? I'll be there in 5 minutes. That's what you always say, and it's always 10. She wasn't wrong, but today he meant it. He gave himself exactly 5 minutes to scan the rest of the email archive, flagging anything that mentioned vendors, payments, or board meetings. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidence. Tenant had known. He'd more than known. He'd facilitated. Every phantom payment, every shell company, every carefully structured transaction had passed through his office with his explicit approval. But knowing wasn't proving. The FBI would need more than suspicious emails and convenient timing. They'd need financial records showing tenants' direct benefit from the fraud. They'd need bank transfers, shell company ownership, smoking guns that couldn't be explained away by professional courtesy or administrative oversight. Ethan texted Victoria while pouring milk over Mara's cereal. Emails confirmed tenant knew. But we need financials. His personal accounts, property records, anything showing unexplained income. I can't access that without FBI involvement. Those are private records. Then we get the FBI involved. They're already involved. They're investigating me. So give them a better target. Mara appeared at his elbow, peering at his phone. You're texting during breakfast. That's against the rules. She was right. He pocketed the phone and sat down across from her at their small kitchen table. Sorry, you're right. Rules are rules. Is it the puzzle lady? Ethan paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. What? The lady with the puzzle. You keep helping her. Is she nice? She's in trouble, and I'm trying to help her get out of it. Like when you helped Mrs. Chen find out who was stealing packages from the lobby? Similar. Mara ate her cereal thoughtfully, milk dripping from her spoon. Mom says you spend too much time helping other people and not enough time helping yourself. That sounded exactly like Simone. What do you think? I think helping people is good, but you should also eat breakfast and not just drink coffee. Out of the mouths of 8-year-olds. Ethan forced down a few bites of cereal, then helped Mara pack her school bag while she chattered about her ocean project. They were building a diorama of the Pacific Reef System, complete with coral made from painted cardboard and fish cut from construction paper. She'd assigned him to bring home kelp materials this weekend. Can we go to the craft store Saturday? She asked as they walked to the bus stop 3 blocks away. Absolutely. And get the good glitter? Not the cheap kind that falls off? The good glitter. I promise. The bus arrived in a hiss of brakes and exhaust. Mara hugged him tight, then bounded up the steps with her backpack bouncing. She waved from a window seat, and he waved back until the bus rounded the corner and disappeared. His phone buzzed before he'd made it back to the apartment. FBI wants to meet. Today, noon. They're bringing tenant in for questioning. Ethan's stomach dropped. Did they say why now? Someone tipped them off about the email pattern. I'm guessing corporate counsel flagged it when they saw what I pulled. Do they want me there? No. But they want my consultant there. Same thing. He checked the time. Just past 8. He had 4 hours to prepare for a conversation that could either clear Victoria completely or drag them both deeper into an investigation that was starting to feel less like justice and more like a trap. He spent those 4 hours building a forensic presentation that would make a courtroom weep. Every email exchange, every payment pattern, every phantom vendor linked back to tenant with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. By 11:30, he had 47 slides of damning evidence and a thumb drive that could end a career. The FBI field office occupied a gray tower in downtown Portland, all concrete and tinted glass and the kind of architecture that announced federal authority without saying a word. Ethan cleared security at 11:55 and was escorted to a conference room on the 7th floor by an agent who looked too young to be carrying a badge. Victoria was already inside, sitting across from a woman in her mid-40s with dark hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. FBI Special Agent Melissa Garrett. She stood when Ethan entered, extending a hand. Mr. Cross, thank you for coming on short notice. Her grip was firm, professional, designed to convey competence without aggression. Ethan shook once and released. Happy to help. Please, sit. Garrett gestured to a chair beside Victoria, who looked like she'd aged a year since dinner 2 nights ago. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hands were clasped so tightly on the table that her knuckles had gone white. Ethan sat, setting his laptop bag on the floor, but keeping the thumb drive in his pocket. I'll get straight to it, Garrett said, opening a folder in front of her. We've been investigating David Lowell for 18 months. Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. We have solid evidence linking him to multiple corporate thefts totaling over $20 million. What we don't have is his accomplice inside Riverton Industries. You think there is one, Ethan said. Not a question. We know there is one. The fraud was too clean, too sustained, too perfectly timed to board oversight gaps. Someone inside helped him. Someone with access, authority, and motivation. And you think it's Ms. Hale? Garrett's expression didn't change. Ms. Hale was one of 4 people with the necessary access. Until this week, she was our primary suspect. Victoria flinched slightly, but said nothing. What changed? Ethan asked. She did something interesting. Instead of lawyering up and stonewalling, she hired a forensic accountant and handed over evidence that implicated herself in dozens of fraudulent payment approvals. Garrett leaned back. That's either the move of someone with nothing to hide or someone very good at misdirection. Which do you think she is? I think she's smart, and I think she's desperate. Both make people unpredictable. Garrett shifted her attention to Victoria. Your email poll this morning flagged something we'd missed. Marcus Tennant's communication pattern with Lowell. We've had Tennant on our periphery, but we didn't have enough to justify deep scrutiny. You gave us that. I gave you what my consultant found, Victoria said, her voice steady despite the tension radiating from her shoulders. Which brings us to you, Mr. Cross. Garrett's eyes locked onto Ethan like targeting lasers. You appear out of nowhere on a Friday night, work through the weekend producing forensic analysis that conveniently clears Ms. Hale, and now you've identified her CFO as a potential accomplice. That's either extraordinary timing or extraordinary planning. Ethan held her gaze. I met Ms. Hale 12 days ago in a hotel lobby during a storm. We shared a suite because the hotel was overbooked. She needed help. I had the skills. That's the entire relationship. And you did this work pro bono. I did. Why? Because the fraud was obvious once you knew where to look, and she didn't have time to wait for someone who'd charge her properly. That's altruistic. That's practical. I don't like watching innocent people burn for crimes they didn't commit. Garrett made a note in her folder. Tell me about your firm. Cross Forensic Consulting, solo practice, established 3 years ago. Small client base, mostly local nonprofits and restaurants. No major corporate clients until now. That's accurate. Ever done work for Riverton Industries before? No. Ever met David Lowell? No. Marcus Tennant? Never heard his name until Ms. Hale mentioned him Wednesday night. Garrett's pen paused. You saw Ms. Hale Wednesday night. Ethan felt Victoria stiffen beside him. He kept his voice level. She bought me dinner to thank me for the weekend work. We discussed the case. That's when I noticed the payment date pattern aligned with board meetings. And you texted her about this at 1 in the morning. So they'd pulled Victoria's phone records. Ethan filed that away. I texted her when I found the pattern. Time of day wasn't relevant to the evidence. Everything's relevant, Mr. Cross. Garrett closed her folder. Here's what I know. David Lowell is going to prison. The evidence is overwhelming. What I need to know is whether he had help from Marcus Tennant, Victoria Hale, or both. You're telling me it's Tennant. The evidence says it's Tennant. Evidence can be manufactured. Not this evidence, not without access to systems I don't have, and expertise that would take years to build. Ethan pulled the thumb drive from his pocket and set it on the table. Everything's on here. Email patterns, payment approvals, board meeting correlations, vendor shell company registrations traced back to filing entities Tennant used for personal LLCs. You want an accomplice? He's been sitting in your building for 12 years. Garrett stared at the thumb drive like it might explode. You brought evidence to an FBI interview. You asked for cooperation. That's cooperation. Or it's obstruction.
Yes.
It's 47 slides of forensic analysis that any competent accountant could verify in under an hour. If I'm wrong, you'll know. If I'm right, you'll have your case. Silence filled the conference room, broken only by the hum of fluorescent lights and distant voices from the hallway. Garrett picked up the thumb drive, turning it over in her fingers. If this checks out, she said slowly, and Tennant is our accomplice, you've just handed us a prosecutable case. If it doesn't check out, you've wasted federal resources and put yourself under investigation for evidence tampering. I'll take that risk. Garrett stood. Wait here. She left the room, taking the thumb drive with her. The door clicked shut with the finality of a cell lock. Victoria turned to Ethan, her voice barely above a whisper. What did you just do? Gave them a target they can actually hit. You gave them everything. If they decide you're part of this, they won't, because the evidence is clean. He met her eyes. Trust me. I do. That's what scares me. They sat in silence for 20 minutes. No water, no coffee, no agent checking in to tell them what was happening. Just the weight of waiting while strangers dissected work Ethan had built from midnight oil and desperation. When the door finally opened, it wasn't Garrett who entered. It was a man in his late 50s, gray suit, federal prosecutor written all over him in the way he carried himself, like someone who'd won more battles than he'd lost, and expected this to be another victory. Mr. Cross. Miss Hale. He didn't sit. I'm Assistant U.S. Attorney Richard Brennan. I've been reviewing your evidence for the past 15 minutes. Ethan's pulse kicked up despite his best efforts to stay calm. And? It's compelling, circumstantial in places, but the email pattern combined with the payment approvals and Tennant's financial ties to the shell company registration firms creates a strong narrative. Brennan set a folder on the table, Ethan's analysis, printed and annotated. We're bringing Tennant in for formal questioning this afternoon. If he lawyers up, we'll take it to a grand jury. If he talks, we'll offer a deal in exchange for testimony against Lowell. Victoria's breath came out in a rush. So I'm clear? You're no longer our primary suspect, but you're not completely clear until we have Tennant's testimony or financial records proving his direct benefit from the fraud. Brennan's expression softened slightly. You did the right thing, Ms. Hale. Cooperating fully, bringing in external expertise, handing over evidence even when it complicated your position. That goes a long way toward establishing credibility. What about Ethan? Victoria asked. Is he under investigation? Mr. Cross will need to provide a formal statement about his involvement and make himself available for follow-up questions as the case progresses. But absent any evidence of collusion or obstruction, he's a witness, not a suspect. The relief that washed over Ethan was so sudden and intense that he had to grip the edge of the table to stay grounded. A witness, not a suspect, just a forensic accountant who'd done his job and done it well. When do you need the statement? He asked. Before you leave today. Agent Garrett will take it. Brennan picked up the folder. One more thing, the analysis you provided. It's the kind of work that could make or break cases. Have you considered doing this professionally? Federal consulting? Ethan almost laughed. I have an 8-year-old daughter and a life that doesn't involve testifying in federal court every other week. But I appreciate the offer. Brennan smiled, the first genuine expression Ethan had seen from him. Fair enough. But if you change your mind, my office has a list of approved forensic consultants who work major fraud cases. Your name could be on it. He left, and Garrett returned to take Ethan's statement. It took 90 minutes of detailed questioning. How he met Victoria, what analysis he performed, what tools he used, what conclusions he drew. Ethan answered every question with the precision of someone who'd built a career on being right, and by the time Garrett closed her notebook, he could see the shift in her expression. He wasn't a suspect, he was a resource. "You're free to go," she said, "but stay local. We may need follow-up as the investigation proceeds." "I live here. I'm not going anywhere." Victoria walked him out through security, neither of them speaking until they reached the lobby. The afternoon sun cut through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the marble floor. "Thank you," she said finally, "for everything, for believing me, for risking this. You didn't give me much choice. You were drowning, and I had a life preserver. Most people would have thrown it and walked away. I'm not most people." She smiled, and for the first time in days it reached her eyes. "No, you're really not." His phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Chen. "Mara's here. School called. Early dismissal for teacher in service. She's fine. We're making cookies." Ethan showed Victoria the message. "I need to go. Single father duties." "Go. I'll call you if anything changes." "When?" he corrected. "When things change. They're bringing Tennant in this afternoon. This is going to move fast now." She nodded, and they stood there for a moment longer, two people who'd met by accident and survived by alliance, neither quite ready to let the other walk away. "Dinner again sometime?" Victoria asked. "When this is over and we're not dodging federal investigations?" "I'd like that." "Good, me too." He left her standing in the lobby and drove across town through afternoon traffic, his mind already shifting gears from fraud patterns to chocolate chip cookies and ocean dioramas. Mara met him at Mrs. Chen's door with flour on her nose and a grin that made everything else, the FBI, the investigation, the sleepless nights, feel manageable. "Dad, we made 17 cookies and I only ate 3. That's very restrained. Mrs. Chen said I could have one more if you said yes." He looked at Mrs. Chen, who shrugged with practiced innocence. "The child drives a hard bargain." "One more," he agreed. "But then we're going home and you're doing homework. Deal." They walked back to the apartment hand in hand, Mara chattering about her day, about the teacher in service, about the boy in her class who'd brought a hermit crab for show and tell. Normal. Safe. His. His phone buzzed again as they reached their building. A news alert. Breaking. FBI arrests former Riverton Industries CFO Marcus Tennant on charges of wire fraud and conspiracy. Ethan stopped walking, staring at the screen. They'd moved faster than he'd expected, much faster. Another text, this one from Victoria. "It's done. They arrested him an hour ago. He tried to run." "Run where?" "Airport. Had a ticket to the Caymans. One way." Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. Tennant had been ready to flee, which meant he'd known the walls were closing in, which meant someone had tipped him off. Who knew you pulled his records? Just corporate counsel and the FBI. Then someone talked. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Ethan, there's more." They found offshore accounts. 15 million. Tennant wasn't just helping Lowell, he was running his own operation on the side. 15 million. The number sat in Ethan's mind like a stone. "Jesus," he texted back. "They're offering him a deal. Full cooperation in exchange for reduced sentencing. He's talking, right now." "Dad?" Mara tugged on his sleeve. "You're doing the work face again." He pocketed the phone. "Sorry, Bug, just work stuff. Come on, let's go make dinner." But as they climbed the stairs to their apartment, as Mara ran ahead to pick out a movie for after homework, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Tennant was talking, which meant he was giving up names. And if he was running his own operation separate from Lowell, there had to be others involved, other accomplices, other targets. His phone buzzed one final time as he unlocked the apartment door. Victoria's name on the screen. Tennant just gave the FBI 3 more names, all Riverton executives. "This goes deeper than we thought." "How much deeper?" I don't know, but the FBI just expanded the investigation. They're freezing company assets pending full audit. What does that mean for you? It means I'm not going to work tomorrow. Or the next day. Maybe not for weeks. Ethan stood in his doorway, watching Mara spread her homework across the kitchen table, her little world untouched by fraud and federal investigations and the chaos that adults built and called business. Are you okay? He texted. The reply took longer this time. I don't know. Ask me when this is over. It will be, eventually. Promise? He thought about Tennant fleeing to the airport with $15 million in offshore accounts. He thought about 3 more names added to an investigation that kept growing like a hydra. He thought about Victoria standing in her cleared office with nowhere to go because the entire company was now under federal scrutiny. Promise, he lied. Because sometimes that was all you could offer someone drowning, a lie that sounded like hope, delivered by someone who cared enough to stay on the line. He put his phone away and helped Mara with her math homework, letting the numbers on her worksheet, simple, clean, solvable, replace the ones that had been haunting him for 2 weeks. Outside, the sun set over Portland in shades of orange and gold, the city moving forward like it always did, indifferent to the small dramas of fraud and justice playing out in federal offices and quiet apartments. And somewhere across town, in an FBI interrogation room, Marcus Tennant was still talking. The call came at 6:32 Friday morning, while Ethan was pouring cereal into 2 bowls and trying to convince Mara that yes, she did need to wear a jacket, even though the sun was shining. Victoria's name on the screen. He answered on the second ring. They're done, she said without preamble. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been awake for days or crying for hours. Maybe both. The FBI just cleared me. Officially. Completely. It's over. Ethan set down the cereal box, his hand suddenly unsteady. When? 20 minutes ago. Agent Garrett called personally. Tennant gave them everything. Bank records, email chains, offshore account details, names of everyone involved. I'm not one of them. They have it in writing. Signed confession. Victoria. I'm clear, Ethan. I can go back to work. I can breathe. Her voice cracked on the last word. I just wanted you to know. You should know. You're the reason I'm still standing. Mara appeared at his elbow, tugging on his sleeve. Dad, you said we had to leave in 10 minutes, and it's been 3 and you're still on the phone. He held up one finger, the universal parent signal for just 1 more minute. Where are you right now? Home. My apartment. I haven't left in 2 days. The FBI told me to stay available, and I couldn't go anywhere, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except wait. Have you eaten? A pause. I don't remember. That's not an answer. Then no. Probably not since yesterday afternoon. Ethan glanced at Mara, who was now pointedly tapping an imaginary watch on her wrist. I'm taking my daughter to school, then I'm bringing you breakfast. Real food, not coffee and panic. You don't have to. I know I don't. I'm doing it anyway. Text me your address. He hung up before she could argue, pocketed the phone, and turned to Mara with the kind of forced brightness that only parents could pull off. Okay, Bug, jacket on. We're late. You were on the phone with the puzzle lady again. I was. Is the puzzle finished? Ethan thought about Tennant in federal custody, about offshore accounts drained and executives arrested, about Victoria finally cleared after weeks of living under suspicion. Yeah, I think it is. Good. Can we get the good glitter tomorrow? Absolutely. The bus stop was crowded with the usual morning chaos. Parents in various states of caffeination, kids comparing lunchboxes, Mrs. Chen standing sentinel with her rolling cart of groceries. She caught Ethan's eye and nodded toward Mara, who was showing another girl her new light-up sneakers. She's good, Mrs. Chen said quietly. You look terrible. Thanks for the honesty. Someone has to tell you, you've been running on fumes for 2 weeks. Whatever case you're chasing, I hope it's worth it. Ethan watched Mara laugh at something her friend said, her whole face lighting up with uncomplicated joy. It is. The bus arrived, and Mara hugged him with the fierce intensity she reserved for mornings when she sensed he was distracted. Love you, Dad. Don't forget the glitter. Love you too. I won't forget. She bounded onto the bus and pressed her face against a window, waving until the vehicle turned the corner. Ethan waved back, then pulled out his phone to find Victoria's address waiting in his messages. The drive across town took 25 minutes through morning traffic that crawled like wounded prey. Victoria's apartment was in a newer building near the riverfront, glass and steel, and the kind of sterile modern architecture that screamed expensive and lonely. He stopped at a cafe 3 blocks away and ordered breakfast to go. Scrambled eggs, cakes, wheat toast, fresh fruit, orange juice, and 2 enormous cinnamon rolls because everyone deserved sugar after surviving a federal investigation. Victoria answered her door on the first knock, like she'd been waiting on the other side. She looked exactly how someone should look after 2 weeks of hell. Exhausted, rumpled, wearing sweatpants and a Stanford hoodie that had definitely seen better days. Her hair was pulled into a messy knot. No makeup. Dark circles that could have been bruises. She'd never looked more real. "You brought food," she said, staring at the bags in his hands like they were foreign objects. "I brought food, and I'm not leaving until you eat it." She stepped aside, letting him into an apartment that was exactly what he'd expected. Neat to the point of clinical, minimal furniture, walls decorated with framed degrees and professional awards. Everything in its place. Everything controlled. Except for the coffee table in the living room, which was buried under file folders, legal pads covered in frantic handwriting, and 3 empty coffee mugs. "Sorry about the mess," Victoria said, trailing behind him. "I've been living through an investigation. I know. Sit." She sat on the couch like someone who'd forgotten how furniture worked, perching on the edge while Ethan unpacked breakfast onto the coffee table. He handed her a fork, a napkin, and the scrambled eggs. "Eat. You're very bossy when you're worried about people." "I'm a single father. Bossy is my default setting." She took a bite, then another, and suddenly she was eating like someone who'd just remembered what hunger felt like. Ethan sat in the chair across from her, working on his own food while she demolished hers. "Agent Garrett called at 6 this morning," Victoria said between bites. "I thought something had gone wrong, that Tennant had recanted or the evidence had fallen apart, or—" She stopped, shaking her head. But she said the opposite. She said Tennant gave them everything, not just about Lowell, about his own schemes, about the 3 other executives who were involved. Sharon Wu? And Brian Casper, and someone from accounting I'd never even met, Rebecca Yao, low-level staffer who helped Tennant process payments outside normal channels. Victoria set down her fork, staring at the eggs like they held answers. They arrested all 3 yesterday afternoon. Wu tried to destroy evidence. Casper hired a lawyer and isn't talking. Yao's cooperating in exchange for immunity. And Lowell? Already in custody. Has been for a month, apparently. The FBI was building a bigger case using Riverton as the centerpiece. They wanted everyone involved before they went public. She looked up at him. "I was bait, Ethan. They let me think I was a suspect because it forced me to dig deeper. They knew I'd either incriminate myself or find the real accomplices. Either way, they won." Ethan felt anger flash hot in his chest. "They used you. They used me, and it worked. I'm clear. The company's being restructured. The board fired half the executive team and brought in an outside auditor. I'm being promoted to interim COO while they search for permanent replacements." He blinked. "Promoted. Turns out exposing $20 million in fraud and cooperating with a federal investigation makes you look trustworthy. Who knew?" Her laugh was sharp and bitter. "I spent 2 weeks thinking my career was over, and instead I'm getting Sharon Wu's job." "Do you want it?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She stared at him, fork suspended halfway to her mouth. "What?" "The promotion. Do you want it? Or are you just taking it because it's what comes next?" Victoria set down the fork slowly, her expression unreadable. "I don't know. I spent 10 years fighting for positions like this, climbing ladders, proving myself, sacrificing everything for the next promotion, and now it's here, and all I can think about is how close I came to losing everything." "That's not an answer." "I know." She stood abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked the Willamette River. Morning light poured through the glass, turning her silhouette into something fragile and fierce at the same time. "I'm tired, Ethan. I'm so tired of fighting, of proving myself, of living like every day is a battle I might lose." He joined her at the window, standing close enough to feel the tension radiating from her shoulders. "Then don't take it. Walk away. Find something that doesn't make you feel like you're drowning." And do what? I've built my entire life around this career. Without it, I'm... She stopped, voice catching. I don't know who I am without it. You're the person who didn't crumble when a federal investigation tried to bury you. You're the person who fought back with evidence instead of lawyers. You're the person who hired a stranger in a hotel lobby because you were desperate and smart enough to know you needed help. He turned to face her fully. You're a lot of things, Victoria. Your job title is just one of them. She looked at him with something raw in her expression, gratitude and fear and exhaustion all tangled together. How do you do that? Do what? Make complicated things sound simple. Practice. I have an 8-year-old who asks hard questions every single day. You learn to cut through noise. Victoria smiled despite herself, and the tension in her shoulders eased fractionally. What would Mara say about all this? Mara would say you should eat the cinnamon roll because life's too short to skip dessert. And then she'd probably ask if you have any glitter for her ocean project. Smart kid. The smartest. They ate the cinnamon roll standing at the window, watching Portland wake up beneath them. Runners on the riverfront path, early commuters crossing bridges. The city moving forward with the relentless momentum of a place that never stopped long enough to notice individual tragedies or triumphs. I need to ask you something, Victoria said after a long silence. And I need you to be honest. Okay. That Friday night. In the hotel. When you offered to share the suite, was it really just about practicality, or was it something else? Ethan considered the question carefully, turning it over in his mind the way he turned over evidence. It was practical. You needed a room. I needed a room. Sharing made sense. But I also saw someone who was about to walk into a fight alone and decided I didn't want to watch that happen. He met her eyes. I spend my life looking for elegant solutions to impossible problems. You were both. So I offered. And now? Now I'm standing in your apartment making sure you eat breakfast after a federal investigation almost destroyed you. I'd say the solution got more complicated. Victoria laughed. A real laugh this time, not bitter or broken. Complicated is one word for it. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from his office voicemail service. 3 new messages, all from existing clients checking on project timelines. Real life, bleeding back in now that the crisis had passed. I should go, he said reluctantly. I have client calls this afternoon and I'm behind on everything. Of course. Thank you for... She gestured at the breakfast remains. For this. For all of it. Victoria? Yeah? Take the weekend. Don't make any decisions about the job until you've slept for more than 4 hours and eaten at least 2 real meals. The promotion will still be there Monday. Is that your professional advice? That's my advice as someone who's made decisions while exhausted and regretted most of them. He headed toward the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. And when you're ready, when this is really over and you're not just surviving anymore, we should have that dinner, the one where we're not talking about fraud or investigations or federal agents. I'd like that. Good, me too. He left before the moment could stretch into something neither of them was ready for, and drove back across town with his mind already cataloging the work he'd neglected while chasing Victoria's case. 3 client calls, 2 overdue reports, 1 restaurant owner who'd been waiting for final embezzlement documentation for a week. Normal work. Clean work. The kind that didn't involve FBI agents or offshore accounts, or people whose lives hung in the balance of numbers. He spent Friday afternoon and most of Saturday catching up, returning calls, finishing reports, rebuilding the careful structure of his practice. Mara helped by sitting at the kitchen table and doing her homework while he worked at his laptop, both of them comfortable in the shared silence of focused work. Saturday afternoon, they went to the craft store and bought the good glitter, 3 colors, because Mara couldn't decide and Ethan was too tired to argue. They built the ocean diorama on the living room floor, Mara narrating the ecosystem while Ethan hot-glued construction paper fish to painted cardboard coral. This one's a clownfish, Mara announced, holding up an orange creation covered in white stripes. They live in anemones for protection. Smart fish. They're also really loyal. Once they find their anemone, they stay there forever. Ethan glued another piece of kelp to the background. Forever's a long time. But they're safe there. The anemone protects them, and they help the anemone by cleaning it. It's called... She scrunched her face in concentration. Something. Symbiosis. Yeah, that. They help each other, and both of them are better because of it. He looked at his daughter, covered in glitter and glue, earnestly explaining fish relationships like they held the secrets of the universe. That's pretty cool, Bug. I think so too. Do you have a Symbi thing with the puzzle lady? The question landed like a well-aimed stone. What? You helped her with her puzzle, and she bought you dinner, and now you're friends. That's helping each other, right? Out of the mouths of 8-year-olds. I guess it is. Good. You should have more friends. You're always working, and you never go anywhere except my school and the grocery store. I go places. Workplaces don't count. She stuck another fish to the coral with more enthusiasm than precision. Mrs. Chen says you need to have fun sometimes. Mrs. Chen talks too much. Mrs. Chen is wise. That's what she says about herself. Ethan laughed despite himself and pulled Mara into a hug, getting glitter all over both of them. You're probably right, but you're stuck with me anyway. I know, I don't mind. They finished the diorama as the sun set, then ordered pizza and watched a movie that Mara had seen 17 times and still laughed at in all the same places. Normal. Safe. His. Sunday morning arrived quiet and clear, the kind of Portland autumn day that made you forget winter was coming. Ethan was making pancakes when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Cross, this is Richard Brennan, U.S. Attorney's Office. Ethan set down the spatula. Mr. Brennan, I wanted to update you on the Riverton case. All 4 suspects are in custody. Tennant, Wu, and Casper are being held without bail pending trial. Yao's cooperating and will likely receive probation. Lowell's lawyer is negotiating a plea deal, but we're not optimistic. And Victoria Hale? Completely exonerated. We've issued a formal letter clearing her of any suspicion. She's free to resume her normal activities without restriction. Relief washed over Ethan so suddenly he had to grip the counter. That's good news. It's excellent news. And it's largely thanks to your forensic work. The timeline you built, the payment pattern analysis, that's what broke the case wide open. Brennan paused. Which brings me to the real reason I'm calling. My offer from Thursday still stands. We need good forensic consultants. People who can do what you did, find patterns others miss, build airtight cases, testify if necessary. The pay is federal contract rate, which is considerably better than small nonprofit work. I appreciate that, but my answer hasn't changed. May I ask why? You're clearly talented. You could be doing major cases instead of restaurant embezzlements. Ethan looked through the doorway at Mara, who was setting the table with exaggerated care, making sure each fork was exactly parallel to its knife. Because restaurant embezzlements don't require me to miss bedtime, and small nonprofit work means I'm home when my daughter gets off the bus. Federal contracts mean late nights and last-minute travel, and a life that doesn't fit the one I've built. That's... Brennan stopped, seeming to recalibrate. That's admirably honest. It's practical. I made my choice 3 years ago when I left the Big Four. I'm not interested in remaking it. Fair enough, but if you ever change your mind, my door's open. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you for the update on the case. You earned it, Mr. Cross. Good luck with your daughter and your dioramas. Ethan hung up and returned to the pancakes, flipping them with the practiced motion of someone who'd made thousands. Mara appeared at his elbow, peering at the griddle. Who was that? Work stuff. Nothing important. Was it about the puzzle? Sort of. Is it really finished now? Ethan slid 3 perfect pancakes onto her plate. Yeah, Bug, it's really finished. Good. Now you can help me with my book report. It's due Tuesday, and I haven't started. What's the book? Charlotte's Web. It's about a spider and a pig who are friends even though they're different. Sounds familiar. It's really sad at the end, though. The spider dies. Life's like that sometimes. Mara considered this while drowning her pancakes in syrup. But the pig remembers her, and her babies stay with him. So it's sad but also happy. That's a good way to look at it. They ate breakfast in comfortable silence, and Ethan tried not to think about federal contracts or major cases or the life he could have had if he'd made different choices. This life, pancakes and book reports and glitter on the floor, was the one he'd chosen. It was enough. His phone buzzed again an hour later while he was helping Mara outline her book report. Victoria's name on the screen. Are you free this afternoon? I want to show you something. Depends. Does it involve more fraud? No fraud. Promise. Just something I think you'll appreciate. What time? 2? I'll pick you up. Dress casual. He agreed, curiosity overriding his usual Sunday routine of laundry and meal prep. Mara was with Simone that afternoon anyway. Weekend custody swap at 1 o'clock, which meant he had a few hours to himself. Victoria arrived exactly at 2, driving the same practical sedan but looking entirely different. Gone was the exhausted woman in sweatpants. She wore jeans and a light sweater, her hair loose, her face finally free of the shadows that had haunted it for weeks. She looked rested. Whole. Where are we going? Ethan asked as he climbed into the passenger seat. You'll see. She drove east through the city, past downtown, past the inner neighborhoods, out toward the foothills where Portland gave way to forest. They talked about nothing important, the weather, the weekend, a movie she'd watched the night before. Easy conversation, the kind that happened between people who'd survived something difficult together and were learning how to just exist afterward. 20 minutes later, she pulled into a parking lot at the base of a hiking trail. Forest Park stretched out before them, hundreds of acres of dense green canopy and winding paths. We're hiking? Ethan said. Short hike, 20 minutes up, 20 minutes down. There's something at the top I want you to see. They climbed in comfortable silence, the trail steep enough to make conversation difficult but not impossible. Other hikers passed them going both directions, couples, families, a man walking 3 dogs on separate leashes. Portland on a Sunday afternoon, doing what Portland did best. The viewpoint appeared suddenly, a clearing at the top of the ridge that opened onto a panorama of the entire city. Downtown's skyline rose in the distance, the rivers cutting silver paths through the urban landscape, Mount Hood visible on the horizon under clear skies. Victoria walked to the edge of the clearing and sat on a bench someone had installed years ago. Ethan joined her, catching his breath. I came here the day after the board cleared me, Victoria said. Drove out alone, hiked up, sat right here for 2 hours. Why? Because I needed to remember what it felt like to be somewhere high up by choice instead of falling. Ethan understood immediately. And it helped. Reminded me that not every summit is a corporate ladder. Sometimes it's just a hill with a good view. She turned to face him. I'm taking the promotion. Yeah? But I'm also setting boundaries. No 80-hour weeks. No sacrificing everything for the next rung. I'm building something sustainable instead of something that breaks me. She paused. And I'm starting therapy. Real therapy, not just crisis management, because I don't want to be the person who only knows how to fight. That sounds like a good plan. It's terrifying, but I think good plans usually are. She pulled something from her pocket, a business card, which she handed to him. This is my new direct line, not the office number, my personal cell, email, everything. Because I want you to have a way to reach me that doesn't involve federal investigations or midnight evidence reviews. Ethan took the card, running his thumb over the embossed lettering. Victoria, I know this is fast. I know we met 3 weeks ago under terrible circumstances. I know you have a daughter and a life that doesn't include space for whatever this is. She gestured between them. But I also know that you saw me at my worst and didn't run. You helped me when you had absolutely no reason to. And I'd like to find out what happens when we're both just normal. Not drowning, not fighting, just 2 people who maybe want to have dinner without discussing fraud. Ethan looked out at the city spread below them, at the life he'd built down there in those streets and neighborhoods. Safe, structured, predictable. Everything he'd fought for after the divorce. And then he looked at Victoria, who'd survived a federal investigation and come out the other side stronger instead of broken, who'd climbed a hill just to remember what choice felt like. Who was offering him something that was definitely not safe or structured or predictable? Mara asks about you, he said finally. Calls you the puzzle lady. Wants to know if we're friends. What do you tell her? I tell her we are, because that's the truth. Is that all we are? Ethan thought about that Friday night in the hotel suite. About Victoria standing in her apartment looking lost and found at the same time, about the way his pulse kicked up when her name appeared on his phone. I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out. Victoria smiled, genuine and unguarded and bright enough to rival the view. So would I. They sat on the bench as the afternoon stretched toward evening, watching the city lights begin to flicker on in the growing dusk, not talking about fraud or investigations or the weight of choices made under pressure, just sitting, just being. Eventually, Victoria's phone buzzed with a reminder about something mundane, groceries maybe, or laundry. Real life, calling them back down the mountain. "We should go," she said reluctantly. "Yeah." But neither of them moved immediately, both unwilling to leave this space where they'd finally found solid ground. "Next Sunday," Victoria said as they stood. "Dinner. Real dinner. Somewhere nice. No case files, no federal agents, no business cards. I'd like that. Bring Mara if you want. I'd like to meet the puzzle lady's biggest fan." Something warm settled in Ethan's chest at the casual inclusion, at the acknowledgement that his daughter wasn't an obstacle, but part of the package. She'd love that. Fair warning, she'll probably ask you about ocean ecosystems and whether you have glitter. "I'll study up." They hiked back down as the sun set, the trail growing shadowy and cool. Victoria dropped him off at his apartment just as the streetlights flickered on. And this time when they said goodbye, it felt less like an ending and more like a comma in a sentence that was still being written. Ethan climbed the stairs to his apartment and found Mrs. Chen waiting outside his door with a covered dish. "Leftover dumplings," she announced. "You look like you haven't eaten properly in weeks." "I'm fine, Mrs. Chen." "You're skinny and distracted and you've been working too hard." She thrust the dish into his hands. "Eat, rest, stop solving other people's problems long enough to take care of yourself." "Is this a neighborhood intervention?" "This is an old woman telling you what you need to hear." Her expression softened. "You're a good man, Ethan Cross. But even good men need to remember they deserve good things too." She shuffled away before he could respond, leaving him standing in the hallway with dumplings and advice he wasn't sure how to process. Inside, his apartment felt quieter than usual without Mara's presence filling it with noise and chaos. He heated the dumplings, ate standing at the counter, and thought about Victoria on that bench overlooking the city. His phone buzzed one final time as he was getting ready for bed. "Thank you for today, for listening, for not thinking I'm crazy for hiking to a viewpoint just to think. Not crazy, just human. That's generous, that's accurate." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Sunday, 7 o'clock. I'll make reservations. Looking forward to it." "Me too. Sleep well, Ethan Cross." He set the phone down and stood at his bedroom window, looking out at the Portland night. Somewhere out there, Victoria was probably doing the same thing, standing at her window, looking at the same sky, thinking about the same uncertain future. For the first time in 3 weeks, Ethan let himself believe that uncertainty might not be a threat. It might just be possibility. And possibility, he was starting to remember, wasn't something to fear. It was something to choose. Sunday arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that only October in Portland could deliver. Blue skies sharp enough to cut glass, air crisp with the promise of coming winter, leaves turning gold and amber in defiance of the inevitable fall. Ethan woke earlier than necessary, his body refusing to sleep past 6 despite having nowhere to be until evening. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about dinner reservations and first impressions and the particular terror of introducing someone new to his daughter. Mara had been thrilled when he'd mentioned it over breakfast Monday morning, immediately launching into a list of questions that ranged from practical to absurd. What was Victoria's favorite color? Did she like pizza? Had she ever seen a real octopus? Could she help with the ocean diorama presentation on Friday? Ethan had answered what he could and deflected the rest, but Mara's enthusiasm had only grown throughout the week, building towards Sunday with the anticipation of someone about to meet a minor celebrity. Now, with hours still stretching before the actual event, Ethan found himself cleaning the apartment with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. He vacuumed floors that were already clean, organized bookshelves that didn't need organizing, scrubbed a bathroom that Mara had barely used since her last visit. Mrs. Chen caught him wiping down baseboards at 9 in the morning and gave him a look that could have stripped paint. "You're nervous," she observed from his doorway, where she'd appeared without knocking because that was apparently her right as designated neighborhood grandmother. "I'm cleaning." "You're terrified. There's a difference." She stepped inside, surveying his work with the critical eye of someone who'd seen decades of domestic anxiety. "When my husband first met my parents, He cleaned his apartment so thoroughly, he erased the grout. We had to retile the bathroom. I'm not retiling anything. Not yet. Give it another hour. She settled herself on his couch like she owned it. Tell me about this woman. There's nothing to tell. Ethan Cross, I've lived below you for 3 years. I know when you're working late and when you're pacing at midnight and when you're worried about something that isn't your daughter or your clients. This woman, she's different, so tell me. Ethan set down the cleaning spray and sat across from her, suddenly exhausted despite the early hour. Her name is Victoria. We met during that storm 3 weeks ago. She needed help with a work problem. I helped. It got complicated. Complicated how? Federal investigation complicated. Fraud, arrests, the whole thing. He ran a hand through his hair. She almost lost everything. I helped her prove she wasn't involved. Now the case is closed and she wants to have dinner with me and Mara. Mrs. Chen was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. And you're cleaning baseboards because? Because I don't know how to do this. I haven't dated since the divorce. I barely remember how normal relationships work when they're not built on crisis and spreadsheets. So don't make it normal. Make it yours. She leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. You're a good father, Ethan. You're a good man. Any woman who can't see that isn't worth your time. But if this Victoria is half as smart as you think she is, she already knows. The dinner isn't about impressing her. It's about seeing if the person you were during the crisis is the same person you are when life is just life. What if I'm not? Then she's not the right person, but you won't know until you try. Mrs. Chen stood, patting his shoulder as she passed. Stop cleaning. Take Mara to the park. Wear something that makes you feel confident. And remember, if she doesn't like who you really are, that's her loss, not yours. She left, and Ethan sat in his too-clean apartment, letting her words settle into the spaces where panic had been living. She was right. He knew she was right. But knowing and believing were different countries, and he was still stuck at the border between them. Mara returned from Simone's house at 11, bursting through the door with the kinetic energy of someone who'd been promised adventure. She'd insisted on picking her own outfit for dinner, a purple dress with stars on it that she usually reserved for birthday parties, paired with the light-up sneakers she refused to take off for any occasion. Is it time yet? She asked for the 17th time, bouncing on the couch while Ethan tried to read a client email. It's 11:30. We don't leave for 5.5 hours. That's forever. That's how time works. Can we practice what I'm going to say when I meet her? Ethan closed his laptop, recognizing a losing battle. What do you want to say? I want to ask her about the puzzle you helped her solve, and if she's ever been to the ocean, and what her favorite sea creature is, and if she wants to come to my diorama presentation on Friday. Those are all good questions, but maybe save some for later so you don't overwhelm her. What if she doesn't like me? The question landed with unexpected weight. Ethan set aside the laptop entirely and pulled Mara onto the couch beside him. Bug, listen to me. There is absolutely nothing about you that anyone could not like. You're smart and funny and kind, and you ask the best questions. If Victoria doesn't see that, then she's not paying attention. But what if she's only coming to dinner because she likes you and not because she wants to meet me? Then we'll find out. And if that's true, we'll know she's not the right person to keep having dinner with. But I don't think that's going to happen. Why not? Because when I told her I wanted to bring you, she didn't hesitate. She said she wanted to meet you, and she asked me what you liked so she could think of good conversation topics. He smoothed Mara's hair, which was already escaping from the ponytail Simone had attempted. I think she's probably just as nervous as you are. Really? Really. Meeting new people is scary for everyone, even grown-ups. Mara considered this, her face scrunched in concentration. Okay, but I'm still going to ask about sea creatures. I wouldn't expect anything less. They spent the afternoon in the park, Mara burning off nervous energy on the swings while Ethan pushed and tried not to check his phone every 3 minutes. Victoria had texted once that morning, a simple looking forward to tonight, and he'd spent 20 minutes crafting a response that didn't sound either too eager or too casual before settling on us, too. Dating in your 30s, he decided, was somehow more complicated than dating in your 20s had ever been. At 5, they went home to change. Ethan put on dark jeans and a navy button-down that Simone had bought him years ago, and that still fit well enough to make him feel put together. Mara insisted on wearing her star dress despite it being slightly too small, and he didn't have the heart to argue. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror with the kind of fierce satisfaction that made his chest ache. "I look fancy," she announced. "You look perfect." "Do you look perfect?" "I look acceptable." "That's not the same thing." "No, but it's the best I can do." Victoria had chosen a restaurant in the Alberta Arts District, a place called Harvest Moon that specialized in farm-to-table cuisine and had a reputation for being family-friendly without being condescending about it. Ethan had looked it up obsessively throughout the week, studying the menu, reading reviews, trying to determine if it was the kind of place where Mara could be herself without judgment. They arrived 10 minutes early, which meant they were exactly on time by Ethan's internal clock. Victoria was already there, waiting at a table near the windows. She stood when she saw them, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest at the sight of her. She'd dressed carefully but not formally, a deep green sweater and dark slacks, her hair loose around her shoulders, minimal jewelry. She looked like someone who'd thought about the impression she wanted to make and landed on approachable rather than impressive. When she smiled at Mara, it was genuine and warm and reached all the way to her eyes. "You must be Mara," Victoria said, extending her hand like she was greeting an equal. "Your dad's told me a lot about you." Mara shook her hand with exaggerated formality, the way she'd been taught. "He's told me about you too. You had a really big puzzle, and he helped you solve it." "He did. I couldn't have done it without him. That's because my dad's really good at finding things people try to hide. Like when I hid my broccoli in my napkin, and he found it anyway." Victoria laughed, surprised and delighted. "I'll have to remember not to hide broccoli around him." They sat, and the initial awkwardness that Ethan had been dreading never materialized. Victoria asked Mara about school, about the ocean diorama, about her favorite subjects. Mara answered with the unfiltered honesty of someone who hadn't learned to curate her responses yet, describing her teacher as nice but boring, and her best friend as funny but sometimes mean, and her favorite subject as recess because obviously. "What's your favorite sea creature?" Mara asked, seizing the opening she'd been waiting for. That's a tough question." Victoria considered it seriously. "Probably octopuses. They're incredibly smart, and they can change color to match their surroundings." "That's camouflage. We learned about that. It's how they stay safe from predators." "Exactly. What about you?" "I like sea otters because they hold hands when they sleep so they don't drift apart. And also they're really cute." "Those are excellent reasons." The server appeared and they ordered pasta for Mara, salmon for Victoria, risotto for Ethan. The conversation flowed easily, moving from ocean ecosystems to favorite books to the best pizza toppings, which sparked a friendly debate about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Mara argued passionately for yes, Victoria argued equally passionately for no, and Ethan watched them both with something that felt dangerously close to hope building in his chest. Halfway through dinner, Mara excused herself to use the bathroom, and Ethan found himself alone with Victoria for the first time all evening. "She's wonderful," Victoria said immediately. "Ethan, she's absolutely wonderful." "She likes you too, I can tell." "How can you tell?" "Because she's talking to you like a real person instead of performing the way she does when she's nervous around adults she's trying to impress. When she's performing, she gets very polite and quiet. When she's comfortable, she's—" He gestured toward the bathroom, where Mara's laughter could be heard echoing. "That." Victoria's expression softened into something tender. "I was terrified she'd hate me." "Why would she hate you?" "Because I'm the stranger her dad is having dinner with. Because I'm new and different and potentially threatening to the stability she's built since the divorce." "You've been thinking about this a lot." "I have an entire anxiety spiral planned out. It involves her crying, you having to choose between us, and me eating ice cream alone in my apartment while questioning every life choice I've ever made." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand, a gesture that felt both monumental and entirely natural. "For what it's worth, I think you're safe from the anxiety spiral. At least for tonight." "Just tonight?" "I'm a forensic accountant. I deal in evidence, not predictions." Victoria laughed, squeezing his hand before releasing it. "Fair enough." Mara returned, sliding back into her seat and immediately resuming her interrogation about Victoria's job, her apartment, whether she had any pets, and if she'd ever been to the ocean. Victoria answered everything with patience and humor, matching Mara's energy without being patronizing. Dessert arrived, chocolate cake for Mara, creme brulee for Victoria, coffee for Ethan, and the conversation shifted to the diorama presentation on Friday. "You should come," Mara announced suddenly, her face bright with the idea. "It's at 2 o'clock in the cafeteria and everyone's parents are invited, and you could come too because you're my dad's friend and you know about oceans." Ethan felt panic flash through him. "Mara, Victoria probably has work." "Actually," Victoria interrupted gently, "I'd love to come, if it's really okay." Mara looked at her father with pleading eyes. "Dad?" He should say no. He should maintain boundaries, keep Victoria separate from school events and parent obligations, protect the careful divisions he'd built between his different lives. But he looked at Mara's hopeful face and Victoria's careful offer and realized the divisions had already started to blur. "If you're sure," he said to Victoria. "I'm sure. I'll bring the good glitter if you tell me what colors you need." Mara practically levitated out of her chair with excitement, launching into a detailed description of the glitter requirements while Ethan sat back and wondered when exactly he'd lost control of this situation. Not that it felt like losing control, it felt more like letting go of something he'd been gripping too tightly for too long. They finished dinner as the restaurant began to empty around them, other families and couples filtering out into the cool evening. The bill came, and Victoria grabbed it before Ethan could move. "My invitation," she said firmly. "My treat." "Victoria, I insist. You can get the next one." The casual assumption that there would be a next one settled warm and solid in his chest. "Deal." Outside, the street was quiet and lit by vintage lampposts that gave the whole district a nostalgic glow. Mara walked between them, holding both their hands and chattering about her presentation strategy for Friday. Victoria caught Ethan's eye over Mara's head, and her smile was soft and private and full of something that looked a lot like happiness. They walked Mara to Ethan's car, parked 3 blocks away. She hugged Victoria goodbye with the unself-conscious affection of someone who'd already decided this person was safe and worth keeping. "See you Friday," Mara called as she climbed into her car seat. "I'll be there," Victoria promised. Ethan buckled Mara in, then straightened to find Victoria waiting a few steps away, giving them space, but not leaving. "I should get her home," he said. "School night." "Of course." They stood in the cone of lamplight, neither quite ready to say goodbye despite the evening having clearly ended. "Thank you for tonight," Victoria said finally. "For trusting me with her. I know that wasn't easy." "It was easier than I expected. You were," he searched for the right word, "real. You didn't try to be anything other than yourself." "I'm too tired to be anything else at this point." "That's not a bad thing." "No," she agreed. "I'm starting to think it's not." Ethan glanced back at the car, where Mara was visible through the window, busy with something on her tablet. He had maybe 30 seconds before she got impatient. "Friday," he said, "after the presentation. If you have time, there's a coffee shop near the school. Good pastries. Terrible coffee, but Mara loves their hot chocolate." "Are you asking me on a second date in front of an elementary school cafeteria?" "I'm asking if you want hot chocolate and mediocre conversation while my daughter tells us everything we already know about ocean ecosystems." Victoria's smile was brilliant. "I'd love that." "Good. Me too." He wanted to kiss her. The impulse hit him with startling clarity, to close the distance between them, to feel if the electricity he'd felt building all evening translated to something real and physical. But Mara was watching, and this moment felt too new and fragile to rush. So instead, he squeezed Victoria's hand once, gently, and stepped back toward the car. "Drive safe," she said. "You too." He watched her walk to her own car, parked in the opposite direction, before getting behind the wheel. Mara looked up from her tablet immediately. "I like her, Dad." "Yeah? She's nice and funny, and she knows a lot about octopuses. Those are all good qualities." "Are you going to keep having dinner with her?" Ethan started the car, pulling out into the quiet street. "I think so. Would that be okay with you?" Mara was quiet for a moment, thinking it over with the seriousness she brought to important decisions. I think it would be okay, as long as she still likes ocean animals and doesn't try to make me eat broccoli. I'll make sure she knows those are the requirements. The drive home was peaceful, Mara eventually dozing off in the back seat while Ethan navigated familiar streets and thought about hands held across tables and promises made for Friday afternoon. Back at the apartment, he carried Mara upstairs, got her changed into pajamas through a fog of half sleep, and tucked her into bed with her stuffed rabbit. "Love you, Bug," he whispered. "Love you too, Dad. Victoria's nice, don't mess it up." He almost laughed. "I'll do my best." Alone in his bedroom, Ethan pulled out his phone and found a text from Victoria, sent 20 minutes ago. "Thank you for tonight. Mara is extraordinary. You're doing an amazing job with her. She liked you too." That's high praise. She's a tough critic. "I was nervous the entire time. You didn't show it. Years of practice hiding panic in boardrooms. Finally useful for something good." He smiled, typing his response carefully. "Friday, 2 o'clock. Don't forget the good glitter. Already added to my calendar. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Victoria." The week that followed felt both impossibly long and startlingly fast. Ethan worked through his client backlog with renewed focus, finished reports that had been languishing, took calls that he'd been postponing. The rhythm of normal work felt grounding after weeks of crisis management and federal investigations. Wednesday afternoon, Agent Garrett called with a final update. "Tenant pleaded guilty to all charges," she said without preamble. 23 counts of wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. He'll serve minimum 15 years, possibly more depending on restitution. Lowell's going to trial, but his lawyer's already talking plea deal. Wu and Casper are facing similar charges. Yao's testimony sealed the case. And Victoria? Completely exonerated. We've closed her file. She's free and clear. Relief washed through Ethan, even though he'd known this was coming. "That's good to hear." "It's better than good, Mr. Cross. It's justice." Garrett paused. "The evidence you provided was instrumental. I want you to know that. Without your forensic analysis, this case could have dragged on for months or collapsed entirely." "I was just doing what the numbers told me to do." "That's what makes you good at this. Most people fight what the numbers tell them. You listen." Another pause. "My offer stands, by the way. Federal consulting work. You'd be excellent at it." "And my answer stands too, but I appreciate it." "Fair enough. Take care of yourself, Mr. Cross. And that daughter of yours." "I will." He hung up and sat in his quiet office, thinking about cases closed and futures opening, and the particular satisfaction that came from following numbers to their logical conclusion and finding justice waiting at the end. Friday arrived bright and cold, the kind of autumn day that required jackets but rewarded them with blue skies. Ethan left work early and picked up Mara from school, listening to her nervous chatter about the presentation, about whether people would like her diorama, about whether Victoria would really come. "She'll be there," Ethan assured her for the 5th time. "She promised." But what if she forgot? She didn't forget. She has it on her calendar. The cafeteria was packed with parents and younger siblings, folding tables lined with dioramas representing every ecosystem imaginable: deserts, rainforests, tundra, coral reefs. Mara's ocean project held pride of place near the center, complete with the good glitter and construction paper fish that had consumed their weekend. Victoria arrived at exactly 2 o'clock carrying a small gift bag and wearing a professional but approachable outfit. Slacks and a sweater, hair pulled back, looking like someone who'd come straight from a corporate office but didn't mind. "You came!" Mara practically launched herself at Victoria, who caught her with practiced ease. "Of course I came. I promised." She held up the gift bag. "And I brought extra glitter, 3 new colors, just in case." Mara opened the bag with reverent care, pulling out containers of blue, silver, and iridescent purple glitter. "This is the best, thank you." "You're very welcome. Now show me this famous diorama." Mara dragged Victoria to her project, launching into a detailed explanation of kelp forests and symbiotic relationships and why sea otters were objectively the best marine mammals. Victoria listened with the same focused attention she'd brought to dinner, asking questions, pointing out details, genuinely engaged. Ethan stood back and watched, something warm expanding in his chest. This, Victoria kneeling beside his daughter, laughing at Mara's enthusiastic descriptions, looking entirely comfortable in an elementary school cafeteria surrounded by construction paper and proud parents. This felt significant in a way he couldn't quite articulate. Other parents drifted over, introducing themselves, asking about Victoria's connection to Mara. She handled it with grace, explaining she was a friend of Ethan's without making it weird or complicated. Mrs. Chen appeared from somewhere, took one look at the three of them, and gave Ethan a knowing smile before disappearing again. The presentations began at 2:30, each student taking turns explaining their ecosystem to judges borrowed from the local science museum. Mara was fourth, and she spoke with confidence about ocean zones and biodiversity and the importance of coral reef preservation. She stumbled twice but recovered, and when she finished, the applause was genuine and warm. Afterward, she ran to Ethan and Victoria, eyes shining. "How did I do?" "You were brilliant," Victoria said immediately. "Perfect," Ethan agreed, pulling her into a hug. "Did you see when I almost forgot about the kelp, but then I remembered?" "I saw. You recovered like a professional." They stayed for another hour while the judges deliberated and parents networked, and Mara showed her project to anyone who would listen. Finally, the awards were announced. Mara didn't win first place, but she got honorable mention for creativity, which she accepted with dignified pride. "Honorable mention is still really good," she announced as they walked to the parking lot. "It's excellent," Victoria confirmed. "And I got to use the good glitter, so really, I'm the real winner." "That's the spirit." The coffee shop Ethan had mentioned was 3 blocks away, a small place with mismatched furniture and pastries displayed behind fingerprint-smudged glass. They ordered hot chocolate for Mara, terrible coffee for Ethan, surprisingly good tea for Victoria, and claimed a corner table. Mara was still buzzing with presentation adrenaline, talking a mile a minute about her classmates' projects and the judges' questions and whether they could do a rainforest diorama next. Ethan and Victoria let her talk, interjecting occasionally but mostly just being present while she processed. Eventually, the caffeine and excitement caught up with her. She slumped against Ethan's shoulder, eyes drooping. "I'm not tired," she mumbled. "Of course not. Just resting my eyes." Naturally, within minutes, she was asleep, curled against him with her hot chocolate half finished. Ethan adjusted his position carefully to support her weight, and Victoria watched with an expression he couldn't quite read. "She's lucky to have you," Victoria said softly. "I'm the lucky one." "No, you're both lucky. That's how good families work." They sat in comfortable silence, Mara sleeping between them, the coffee shop's ambient noise washing over them like white noise. After a while, "About wanting to see where After a while, about wanting to see where this goes. Us. Whatever this is. Ethan looked at her across the table, this woman who'd entered his life during a storm and somehow stayed through everything that followed. "I want that too. But I need you to understand, my life isn't simple. It's school presentations and custody schedules and last-minute client emergencies. It's complicated and messy and built entirely around making sure Mara has what she needs." "I know. And I can't promise I'll always have time for fancy dinners or spontaneous weekend trips or whatever normal dating looks like. Most of my time is already spoken for." "I know that too. Victoria reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. I'm not asking for your whole life, Ethan. I'm just asking for whatever space you have. Even if it's coffee shops with terrible coffee and elementary school presentations. Especially if it's that. Something loosened in his chest, a knot he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. You mean that? I mean it. I spent 10 years chasing a version of success that looked impressive but felt empty. I'm not interested in impressive anymore. I'm interested in real. Real is messy. Real is sustainable. And I'm choosing sustainable this time. Ethan thought about that night in the hotel suite, about Victoria refusing to crumble under pressure, about the way she'd fought for the truth, even when it meant risking everything. He thought about dinner last Sunday and the diorama today, and the way she'd knelt on a cafeteria floor to admire construction paper fish with genuine enthusiasm. Okay, he said finally. Let's try real. Victoria's smile was radiant. Yeah, but fair warning. Real means meeting Mrs. Chen officially, and she's going to interrogate you like a federal agent. I survived an actual federal investigation. I think I can handle Mrs. Chen. You say that now. They finished their drinks while Mara slept, talking about nothing important, work schedules, weekend plans, whether the coffee really was as terrible as Ethan claimed. Eventually, Mara stirred, blinking awake with the disorientation of someone who'd fallen asleep in public. Did I miss anything? She mumbled. Nothing important, Ethan said. Ready to go home? Can Victoria come for dinner? Ethan looked at Victoria, raising an eyebrow in question. She nodded. If your dad doesn't mind cooking. He's a pretty good cook, Mara said loyally. He makes really good spaghetti and pancakes, and sometimes tacos. That's quite a repertoire. I work with what I know, Ethan said, standing and offering Victoria his hand. Come on, let's go see what's in my fridge and pretend it'll be impressive. They walked to the parking lot together, Mara between them again, holding both their hands. The autumn sun was setting early, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. People passed them on the sidewalk, other families, couples, individuals lost in their own worlds. Nobody looked twice at the three of them, just another small unit navigating the evening. At the cars, Victoria kissed Mara's forehead. Thanks for letting me come to your presentation. It was the best one there. You have to say that because you're my dad's friend. I'm saying it because it's true. Mara grinned and climbed into Ethan's car. He lingered with Victoria for a moment, neither quite ready to drive separately. Follow me home? He asked. I'd like that. They drove in tandem through familiar streets, Victoria's sedan trailing his older SUV, and Ethan felt something settle in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. Not excitement, exactly. Not the rush of new romance or the thrill of possibility. It was simpler than that. It was certainty. At his apartment, Mrs. Chen was waiting on the front steps, clearly having timed her appearance to coincide with their arrival. She looked Victoria up and down with the assessment of a jeweler examining a diamond for flaws. So you're the woman who's been making my tenant smile like an idiot. Mrs. Chen, Ethan said warningly. I'm Victoria. She extended her hand without hesitation. And yes, I suppose I am. Mrs. Chen shook once, firmly, then nodded like Victoria had passed some invisible test. He's a good man. Bit too serious, works too hard, but good. You heard him or that little girl, you answer to me. Understood. Good. Now go inside before you freeze. I made dumplings. They're in Ethan's freezer. She shuffled toward her own apartment, then paused. And Victoria? Welcome to the building. Try to make him take a day off sometime. He forgets how. She disappeared inside and Mara giggled. Mrs. Chen likes you. She only threatens people she likes. Upstairs, Ethan's apartment felt smaller with 3 people in it, but not uncomfortably so. He heated Mrs. Chen's dumplings while Victoria helped Mara set the table and told her stories about her own school presentations, including one disastrous volcano experiment that had involved too much baking soda and not enough adult supervision. They ate at the small kitchen table, Mara monopolizing the conversation with questions about Victoria's childhood and whether she'd ever wanted to be a marine biologist and what her apartment looked like. Victoria answered everything with patience and humor, and Ethan watched them both with something that felt dangerously close to contentment. After dinner, Mara asked if Victoria wanted to see her room. Ethan expected a polite excuse, but Victoria agreed immediately. following Mara down the short hallway to the bedroom covered in glow-in-the-dark stars and drawings of sea creatures. He cleaned up the dishes, listening to their voices drift from the bedroom, Mara explaining her collection of stuffed animals, Victoria asking about the names and backstories, both of them laughing at something Ethan couldn't quite hear. 20 minutes later, they emerged. Mara was wearing pajamas and carrying her stuffed rabbit. Victoria says I should go to bed at a reasonable hour because growing brains need sleep, Mara announced. Victoria's very wise. I know, that's why I like her. Mara hugged him, then turned to Victoria and hugged her too. Will you come visit again? If your dad invites me. He will. He likes you too. I can tell because he does the smile thing. The smile thing? Where he thinks he's not smiling, but he totally is. He does it when he's happy but trying to hide it. Victoria glanced at Ethan, who was definitely doing the smile thing. I'll watch for that. After Mara was tucked in and her door was closed to the perfect angle she required, Ethan returned to find Victoria standing at his living room window, looking out at the neighborhood lights. She's amazing, Victoria said without turning around. She is. Gets it from her mother. I doubt that. From what I can see, she gets it from both of you. Ethan joined her at the window, standing close enough that their shoulders brushed. Thank you for today, for coming to the presentation, for dinner, for being patient with all of Mara's questions. I wasn't being patient. I was being interested. There's a difference. Still, it means a lot to both of us. Victoria turned to face him, and in the dim light from the street lamps, her expression was open and vulnerable in a way he'd only seen glimpses of before. I need to tell you something. Okay. When I met you, when we shared that hotel room and you helped me with the case, I thought I was just surviving, getting through a crisis. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about survival and started being about something else. About wanting to know the person who could stay calm in the middle of a storm. About wondering if someone who could see through fraud patterns could also see through the walls I'd built around everything else. Victoria, let me finish. She took a breath. I'm not good at this. At letting people in, at trusting that they'll stay. I've spent years building a career that couldn't leave me because I controlled every piece of it. But you're different. You showed up when you had no reason to help. You believed me when everyone else saw a suspect. You gave me space to fall apart and tools to rebuild. And now you're sharing your daughter and your life, and I just need you to know. She stopped, searching for words. I'm terrified, but I'm also sure. And I don't know how to be both of those things at once. Ethan cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. You know what I do for a living? I find truth in numbers. I follow patterns until they tell me stories. And the pattern I see when I look at you. He paused, making sure she was really hearing him. It's someone who's been fighting alone for so long that she's forgotten what it feels like to have someone fight beside her. But you don't have to fight alone anymore. Not if you don't want to. Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I don't want to. Then don't. He kissed her then, finally, properly. Not the careful, almost kiss of people still figuring out boundaries, but the real thing. Her hands came up to grip his shirt, and he pulled her closer. And for a moment the world narrowed to just this. Two people who'd met in a storm and found solid ground together. When they broke apart, Victoria was smiling and crying at the same time. That was overdue? I was going to say perfect, but overdue works too. They stood in his small living room, holding each other while the city moved outside his windows, and Ethan thought about hotel suites and federal investigations and all the ways life could surprise you when you stop trying to control every variable. Stay, he said quietly. Not tonight, not yet, but soon. Stay and see what real looks like when we're not in crisis mode. Stay and meet Mrs. Chen properly and help Mara with her next project and be part of this messy, complicated, beautiful thing we're building. Victoria's smile was brilliant. I'd like that very much. Good, because I'm choosing you, and Mara's already chosen you, and Mrs. Chen's threatened you, which means you're basically family now. That's a lot of pressure. You survived $20 million in fraud in a federal investigation. I think you can handle us. She laughed, the sound full and genuine and free of the weight she'd been carrying for weeks. You know what? I think I can. They talked for another hour, making plans that felt both thrilling and ordinary. Dinner next week, a movie the week after, maybe a weekend trip to the coast if Ethan could arrange Mara's schedule. Real plans, built on the assumption of continuity and the hope of something lasting. When Victoria finally left, it was late and the building was quiet. Ethan walked her to her car, kissed her goodnight under the street lamp, and watched her drive away with the promise of seeing her again already scheduled in both their calendars. Back upstairs, he checked on Mara, who was sprawled across her bed in the chaotic way of sleeping children, her stuffed rabbit clutched tight. He adjusted her blankets and turned off the nightlight she'd forgotten to switch off, then stood in her doorway for a long moment. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Thank you for tonight, for everything, for being exactly who you are. Thank you for seeing who that is. I see you, Ethan Cross. And I like what I see. The feeling's mutual, Victoria Hale. Good night. Dream of good things. Already am." He set down the phone and walked to his bedroom window, looking out at Portland sleeping under clear skies. Somewhere across the city, Victoria was probably doing the same thing, standing at her window, thinking about the same uncertain future that had somehow stopped feeling uncertain. Ethan had built his life on protecting what mattered most, on stability and structure and keeping his daughter safe from the chaos that came with taking risks. But standing there in the quiet of his small apartment, he realized that stability didn't mean avoiding risk entirely. It meant choosing the right risks with the right people. It meant finding someone who could stand firm in the storm instead of waiting for it to pass. It meant believing that sometimes the most elegant solution wasn't the one you calculated in advance. It was the one you discovered by being brave enough to stay. Victoria had walked into a trap built by someone else's greed and refused to let it define her. She'd fought back with truth and evidence and the kind of fierce determination that didn't crumble under pressure. And Ethan, who'd spent years building walls around his carefully structured life, had met someone who made him want to leave the door open. Outside his window, Portland settled into the deep quiet of a Friday night winding down. Lights flickered off in windows across the neighborhood. Mrs. Chen's apartment went dark. The street grew still. And in the morning, Ethan would make pancakes with Mara and help her with homework and live the life he'd fought so hard to build. But now it would have one more person in it. One more voice at the table. One more reason to believe that the future could be more than just survival. It could be joy. It could be partnership. It could be two people who'd met by accident and chosen each other on purpose, building something real in the spaces between their separate lives. Stability over spectacle. Truth over performance. And love, when it came, if it came, built on the solid foundation of two people who'd looked at each other in the middle of a crisis and decided to stay. Ethan Cross went to bed that night with his daughter safe in the next room, a text from Victoria on his phone, and the quiet certainty that sometimes the best cases weren't the ones you solved. They were the ones you chose to live.